Chapter 1245. Reincarnation. Another reincarnation. In that instant, even with Chu Xiu's spiritual sense, he did not discover how the old farmer had appeared or how he had recovered. It was as if time had flowed backward and he had returned to the beginning. Although he knew that all of this should be fake and should be an illusion, his eyes told him that all of this was real. His spirit sense also told him that all of this was real. So where exactly were they fake? A cold glint flashed across Chu Xiu's eyes. With a wave of his hand, he released another wave of stellar qi to strangle the old farmer. His god realm expanded to cover an area of several hundred feet. In an instant, the entire village had vanished into thin air due to the god realm's attack. This time, Chu Xiu raised his mind power to the maximum and used the heaven's sun gazing at air to its limit. However, the instant the entire village was destroyed, his memories seemed to have been wiped away. In the next moment, he was still standing in front of the village. The old farmer had the same, but extremely strange, smile as he looked at Chu Xiu. "Dear guest, you've rushed all the way here. Why don't you rest in the village? The sky is getting dark, and it's not safe to travel at night. If I can't kill you in one go, I'll kill you 10 times, 100 times. A cold glint flashed across Chu Xiu's eyes. He killed everything in front of him again and again. At some point, his eyes had become bloodshot, and his murderous intent grew stronger. In the end, the only thought left in Chu Xiu's mind was kill. He did not even have the thought of searching for the demonic ghost's true body. Just as Chu Xiu was about to lose himself in the murderous intent, he suddenly had an epiphany and snapped out of it. Using his strong willpower, he expelled the murderous intent from his mind. This thing does have some ability. While it seemed as if Chu Xiu was killing the demonic ghost and tearing apart the illusions, in reality, he had already lost himself in them without realizing it. In his eyes and perception, these people were no different from ordinary people. Although he knew that these things were not real people, his eyes and perception told him that they were real people. Although Chu Xiu had killed countless people, he dared to say that he had never killed these ordinary people. He was not bloodthirsty. Killing was just a means, not a pleasure. Those who kill for pleasure are not called demons. They are commonly known as perverted homicidal maniacs. But now, he was killing these ordinary people again and again in such a real environment. The feeling was so real that it had already seeped into his heart and almost blinded him by the murderous intent. In this place, one's eyes and spirit sense were no longer a question of whether they could be trusted or not. Instead, they were burdens that would lead one astray. This time, Chu Xiu was indeed careless. Before coming in, Chu Xiu had always regarded the experts of the other sects as his main targets. He really did not care about these demonic ghosts. He did not expect that he would almost fail miserably in such an easy task. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, since those big sects gave 0.5 kilogram of demonic ghost's soul crystal as the same reward as a token, the difficulty of both sides should be about the same. However, Chu Xiu forgot to ask Zhong Qiushui how much a demonic ghost's soul crystal weighed. If it was only a few taels, then it was really not worth it to use it to deal with other warriors. At this time, the old farmer was still looking at Chu Xiu with a smile. "Guest, you came here in a hurry. Why don't you rest in the village? The sky is getting dark, and it is not safe to travel at night." This time, Chu Xiu also smiled and said, "Sure, it is not safe at night. Maybe I will have to stay in this village for a night." The smile on the old farmer's face showed a slight pause. Then he brought Chu Xiu into the thatched hut. The old woman was still holding a bowl of corpse water with a severed finger and brought it to Chu Xiu's mouth. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not do anything. He actually took the bowl and drank the corpse water in one gulp. The fishy and slippery feeling exploded in his mouth. The severed finger was forcibly swallowed by Chu Xiu, but his expression did not change. He smiled and said, "The farmer's well water is really good. Do you have any more? Give me another bowl." The old farmer and the old woman's faces stiffened for a moment, but the next moment, they immediately returned to normal. The old farmer smiled and said, "Guest, you do not need to be so anxious. Our village has not been visited for a long time. It is not easy to meet an outsider. The village chief has already prepared a banquet for you. Then it would be impolite for me to refuse. Chu Xiu smiled as he pushed the door open. In just a short time, the village's streets were already filled with banquets. Countless villagers stood there and looked at Chu Xiu. However, the banquet was extremely terrifying. There were plates of maggots, cockroaches, centipedes, and other poisonous insects. There was also a rotten head that looked at Chu Xiu with empty eyes. The surrounding villagers looked at Chu Xiu with a smile and said, "Guest, please have a taste. These are our village's specialties. You cannot eat them anywhere else." "Then I will have a good taste." Chu Xiu had a smile on his face as he swallowed the plates of horrifying food into his stomach. The feeling of touch and taste were all very real, but it was as if he was really tasting the delicacies. There was even a satisfied smile on his face. The smiles on the faces of the other villagers froze. A little child who looked like he was carved out of jade opened his mouth wide. In a moment of carelessness, his head actually fell to the ground and rolled twice on the ground. The expression on his face was still that of surprise, which was extremely strange. Chu Xiu picked up the head and put it back. He said indifferently, "Little fellow, you are really careless. You have to look after your own head. If you lose face, you will have nowhere to go." Chu Xiu looked around and said, "Is this all you have? Do you have any other methods? Or is it that after so many years, very few cultivators have been able to make it here, so you are not prepared? However, demonic ghosts are really mysterious. Existences like you are not within the rules of heaven and earth. You are not within the cycle of the 5 elements. You can only be born in a place like the Central Plains. If I want to kill you, cultivation is not the most important thing, but the state of mind. I am afraid that you died here because your state of mind was not up to the standard, right? You Sanskrit people are extreme when you are alive. When you encounter demonic ghosts, it is easy for your state of mind to be out of balance. Now that you are dead, you have not made any progress. You are still trash." As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, he stretched his hand into his stomach and opened up his stomach and took out a severed finger from within. Chu Xiu clenched his fist, and the severed finger transformed into a black-clothed monk. The monk's body was covered in bite marks, and even his face could not be seen clearly. The monk kept struggling in Chu Xiu's hand. As Chu Xiu's world-extinguishing flame bloomed in his hand, the monk was directly burned to ashes. Only a transparent crystal was left on the spot. As the monk turned to ashes, the surrounding village also disappeared. Just like that, it disappeared right before Chu Xiu's eyes, not leaving any traces behind. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. This was the true terror of demonic ghosts, or rather, the true terror of the Central Plains. If you thought it was real, then it was real. If you thought it was fake, then it wasn't necessarily fake. As long as one was in the Central Plains, after death, they would turn into demonic ghosts. This demonic ghost must have been a disciple of the Sanskrit Shiva temple who had entered the exalted divine palace to train. In the end, it died here and became a demonic ghost. Chu Xiu had paid attention to the people from the Sanskrit sect when they entered the Central Plains. Apart from Exangelwa, a half-step martial immortal, there were several dozen people from the Sanskrit sect. Even the weakest among them was at the peak true fire spirit refinement realm. The cultivators from the Sanskrit sect in the past shouldn't have been any weaker than this demonic ghost. Even so, they still died here. The danger of demonic ghosts surpassed Chu Xiu's imagination. He wondered how Lu Fengxian and the others were faring. Chu Xiu subconsciously picked up the soul crystal and weighed it. The soul crystal weighed roughly 5 caddies. This had surpassed Chu Xiu's expectations. Who would have thought that killing demonic ghosts would be more worthwhile than fighting with other martial artists? Actually, Chu Xiu was wrong about this. He could only say that he was unlucky. The weight of the soul crystal determined the strength of the demonic ghost. As for who the demonic ghost was when it was alive, it also determined its strength after becoming a demonic ghost. A soul crystal weighing 5 caddies meant that this demonic ghost was one of the stronger ones in the Central Plains. It was one of the rare ones. Yet Chu Xiu had encountered it. Moreover, it wasn't just a martial artist of the Sanskrit sect, but a palace master of the divine palace of Shiva Palace. Its strength wasn't weak, so after it became a demonic ghost, it had such power that it almost caused Chu Xiu to fail miserably. If it had been some other weaker demonic ghost, Chu Xiu would have been able to deal with it easily with his current state of mind. Chu Xiu picked up the soul crystal and narrowed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while, he suddenly inserted his primordial spirit into the soul crystal and began refining it. Zhong Qiushui had told him that soul crystals could be refined. After refining, it could strengthen one's mental energy and primordial spirit. The reason why the various sects had asked everyone to use soul crystals as tokens was because they were used as a material to strengthen the central planes formation. Soul crystals originated from demonic ghosts and could also be used as a formation material to seal demonic ghosts. The central planes was full of opportunities, but of course, the prerequisite was that one had to be alive to take them. Refining this soul crystal now would rapidly strengthen Chu Xiu's mental energy and primordial spirit, making it even more advantageous when dealing with demonic ghosts. Chu Xiu wasn't worried about the exalted divine palace's mental energy and primordial spirit. From the very beginning he had planned to obtain the right to enter the exalted divine palace by plundering the tokens of other cultivators. Of course, he could also take care of his enemies, such as Xen Jialua and Xen Jialua. The first demonic ghost he had encountered since entering the Central Plains had been a member of the Sanskrit sect. Didn't this mean that the heavens wanted him to end his karma with the Sanskrit sect here? Chapter 1246. Of the several thousand cultivators who entered the Central Plains, only a few would encounter a demonic ghost right away. Although there were many demonic ghosts in the Central Plains, they weren't so numerous that they could be found everywhere. Moreover, those who encountered a demonic ghost might not necessarily run into one as powerful as the one Chu Xiu had encountered. So, in short, Chu Xiu was the unlucky one. Of course, there were people who were even more unfortunate than Chu Xiu. In less than a day's time, there were already a few dozen cultivators who had lost their lives in the central province, and more than half of them had died at the hands of the demonic ghosts. At that moment, at the summit of a tall mountain, Xen Jialua's body flickered with the golden light of the sun. He had reached the pinnacle, but he didn't stop. As his strength climbed to the pinnacle, the laws of strength and the power of the world were trampled beneath his feet. Treading on the sky, he was a true earth immortal. On his first day in the Central Plains, Xen Jialua had already stepped into the martial immortal realm. Zhong Qiushui had previously mentioned to Chu Xiu that some people might find loopholes in the struggle for the Daluo Divine Palace and suppress their cultivation to wait until they entered the Central Plains before stepping into the martial immortal realm. Xen Jialua was such a person. The Brahma sect was also one of the top Daluotian sects and also had peak experts at the ninth heavens of martial immortal realm. They were far more sensitive to such matters than Zhong Qiushui and the others. So Xen Jialua had waited a long time for this day. Chu Xiu. A cold glint flashed in Xen Jialua's eyes. He hoped that Chu Xiu wouldn't die at the hands of the demonic ghost. He still wanted to interrogate Chu Xiu about Moriha's whereabouts. Of course, Xen Jialua's current priority wasn't to find Chu Xiu, but to find other Brahma sect cultivators. Although the laws of heaven and earth in the Central Plains were distorted and all communication techniques like formations couldn't be used. But the Daluotian secret techniques were endless, and formations weren't the only things that could allow one to communicate with others from afar. He had a secret technique he'd obtained from the barbarian tribe's priests that allowed him to faintly sense those with his blood in their bodies. Although this kind of perception was greatly suppressed in the central continent, he could still roughly sense it. At this time, Chu Xiu didn't know that he and Xen Jialua had a telepathic connection and were plotting against each other. After about 6 hours, the soul crystal was completely refined by Chu Xiu. Even the back of his head emitted a dazzling golden light that couldn't be concealed. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh as a look of amazement flashed across his eyes. 2.5 kilograms of soul crystals had increased his spiritual power by 1/10. This effect was simply astonishing. Mental strength was different from normal inner force. It had always been extremely difficult to improve. If Chu Xiu had to rely on hard work to improve this 1/10, he might not be able to achieve it even if he went into seclusion for several years. Looking up at the sky, he saw that the central continent was shrouded in a formation, making it impossible to see the sun, moon, and stars. The sky was obscured by layers of misty radiance. Xan Jiao was going to look for the other Sanskrit disciples, and Chu Xiu was also looking for an opportunity to find Lu Fengxian and the others. After witnessing the strength of the monster ghosts, he was indeed a little worried about them. Moreover, with so many cultivators in the central continent, no matter how amazing Chu Xiu's strength was, he would still need the help of a large number of people to collect enough tokens. This was something Autumn Water had told him about. Throughout history, the final victors of the Exalted Divine Palace had basically always come from a large sect, and they had a group of people behind them to help them collect tokens. After all, your opponents weren't pigs. Even if you could defeat all of them, you still had to capture them one by one and collect tokens. Just tracking them would take up 90% of your time. But what Chu Xiu didn't know was that Lu Fengxian and the others were all luckier than him. In the middle of a withered desert, just like the scene in the Green Capital, countless starving ghosts crawled towards Shang Tianliang with their huge bellies and tiny limbs. Shang Tianliang sneered. "You're about to starve to death, yet you're crawling so slowly. You were useless when you were alive, but now that you're dead, you can't even eat shit when it's hot." Withering power erupted from his body, and the starving ghosts around him exploded one by one. He reached into the stomach of the weakest ghost and fished out a crystal the size of a thumb. Shang Tianliang smiled in satisfaction. "TSK, 3 tails, not a small one." In the pitch-black devil cave, endless darkness engulfed Wei Shuya. A series of low murmurs rang out in his ears, telling him to sleep, telling him to rest. Wei Shuya sighed softly and said, "How can I rest before my great cause is accomplished? If I let go when I'm tired, how many people can reach the end of the dangerous path in this world?" Just as Wei Shuya's voice faded, a speck of light blossomed in his palm. It was like the rootless sacred fire burning on the summit of Kunlun, tearing apart the eternal night. In the ghost town, countless rotting corpses and even skeletons rushed toward Qinqing. But what welcomed them was a huge fist. One punch, and the ghost town was destroyed. Just like the ghost town that Chu Xiu encountered, the ghost town shattered, but it began to reconstruct itself. Qinqing still punched again and again. It was as if he didn't know exhaustion. Again and again, even the ghost town had gone through countless reincarnations, but Qinqing's state of mind didn't change at all. He also didn't want to find the ghost town's true body. In the end, the ghost town even suspected that the guy in front of it was also a fake. The ghost town finally couldn't hold on any longer. A small skeleton escaped underground. However, just as it peeked its head out, a foot suddenly descended and crushed it into pieces. "Finally found you." In the dilapidated temple, countless monks were holding alms bowls with scriptures in their hands, chanting Buddhist scriptures in Lu Jianghu's ears unceasingly. Lu Jianghu sneered. Countless blood threads burst out from his body and entered the bodies of those monks, extracting their blood, but those monks didn't have the slightest change. Lu Jianghu closed his eyes and said with a sneer, "That brat Chu Xiu said that we can't trust our eyes, we can't trust our spiritual sense, but this deity only believes in the feeling of blood and qi. Each and every one of them is very real. The power of their blood and qi are no different from ordinary people. Since that's the case, the one who doesn't look like a human the most is the ghost." Lu Jianghu suddenly turned his hand toward the Buddha statue behind him and fished out a soul crystal. Regardless of the temple or the monks, all of them dissipated. In the brightly lit restaurant, countless handsome and masculine young men were flirting with Mei Qinglian. That's right, in Mei Qinglian's eyes, their actions were flirting with her. Mei Qinglian looked displeased. "Do I look like I'm in need of men? Is this how this thing sees through people's hearts?" She waved her hand lightly, and the karmic fire of the red lotus bloomed in front of her, burning everything. A fat and ugly ghost wanted to escape, but it was shocked to find that the karmic fire of the red lotus had actually ignited in its body, and when it reacted, it had already been burned into a soul crystal. In the mountains of Jianghu, Lu Fengxian didn't encounter any ghost. He just stood there and watched the two true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists fight below. In the end, before he could figure out what was going on, the two of them used their killer moves at the same time and killed each other directly. This made Lu Fengxian, who was ready to experience the martial arts of the other big sects, stunned. However, after a moment of shock, he immediately walked over and searched the two martial artists' corpses for 2 tokens. My luck's not bad. A bright smile appeared on Lu Fengxian's face. He didn't like to fight, so the 2 tokens he'd picked up just happened to be of some help to Brother Chu. On the first day of entering Jianghu, apart from Lu Fengxian, everyone around Chu Xiu encountered a ghost at about the same time, but it didn't take much effort for them to deal with it. None of them were as troublesome as Chu Xiu's. Although Chu Xiu was ready to search for Lu Fengxian and the others, he didn't wander around aimlessly. Instead, he made a beeline for the Exalted Divine Palace in the center of the city. The Exalted Divine Palace had been open for so many years, so it naturally had some experience and tricks left behind by its predecessors. Everyone had to fight in Jianghu for a month before the Exalted Divine Palace truly opened. Thus, almost no one ventured into the center of Jianghu in the beginning. Instead, they circled around the periphery to fight or kill ghost monsters with their fellow cultivators. As a result, the entire region of Jianghu was divided into 3 stages. The first was to search for fellow cultivators and kill ghost monsters in the periphery. They would stay there for about 10 days, during which time nearly half of the people would be eliminated. The next 10 days would be when they entered the center of Jianghu and began fighting and fighting. At this time, those who remained were existences above the heaven and earth insight realm. Most of them were qualified to travel alone in the center of Jianghu and could fend off high-grade ghost monsters. It was also during this stage that the distance between the various sects would shrink and the cultivators of the various sects would converge. The final 10 days would be when the final battle would begin in front of the Exalted Divine Palace to determine the true victor. It could be said to be an extremely bitter fight. But now, Chu Xiu had given up on the first step and was ready to head straight for the passage between the periphery and the center of Jianghu. This way, there was a high chance that he would run into Lu Fengxian and the others, and it would also save him some time. After all, stealing the tokens and soul crystals from others was much faster than spending the effort to search for them himself. In front of the entrance to a canyon in the center of Jianghu, an old man with disheveled hair and a dirty face stared ahead in a daze. He held a bloody head in his hand and swung it back and forth. A strange smile appeared on the old man's face when he saw Chu Xiu's figure. He offered up the head in his hand. "Guest, would you like to have a melon? It's freshly plucked, so its skin is thin and juicy." Chu Xiu raised an eyebrow and a strange smile appeared on his face. "A ghost monster?" The old man acted as if he didn't notice and offered up the head in his hand. However, the head suddenly exploded in the next moment, and an extremely sharp sword light appeared in front of Chu Xiu. The cold sword light froze space and time, and the power of laws was compressed to a radius of 10 meters around the old man, just enough to envelop Chu Xiu's figure. When the sword light appeared between Chu Xiu's brows, he couldn't even move half a step. Chapter 1247. The central province was filled with murderous intents. Not only were there demonic ghosts, but there were also humans. A cold smile appeared on the old man's face. He had killed more than one person with this move. However, in the next moment, the cold smile on his face froze. The cold blade of the sword pierced through Chu Xiu's body, but it dissipated like a bubble. Illusion. Impossible. The old man's eyes widened in disbelief. Illusions might be able to deceive his eyes, but his sword gleam had already sealed the laws of time and space within a radius of 30 feet around him. Although it was only 30 feet, no one would be able to escape using illusions at this distance. Therefore, the only answer was that from the very beginning, from the moment Chu Xiu saw him, he had never treated him as a demonic ghost. What he had seen had always been an illusion. TSK, I've only seen people pretending to be humans, but this is the first time I've seen a human pretending to be a ghost. How creative. A mocking voice came from behind the old man. In the next moment, the cold blade radiance had already enveloped his entire body. It was ethereal and traceless, and its form could not be seen. The old man could only feel the cold blade intent all over his body, but he could not find the source of it. The cold sword chi twisted the power of the rules and instantly exploded from 30 feet around him. Even the ground under his feet was twisted, forming a huge pit with a diameter of 100 feet. However, in the next moment, he saw the cold blade radiance smashing down as if it was tearing the sky and the earth apart. Chu Xiu held the breaking formation in his hand. It looked like a simple slash, but the momentum of the blade was extremely fierce. A loud sound of metal colliding was heard. The long sword in the old man's hand immediately shattered, and his entire body was sent flying by the huge force. Originally, Chu Xiu's physical cultivation was not weak. At this time, with the blessing of the demon god's power, his physical strength was shockingly strong. Among those at the same level, except for Qinqing Di, Chu Xiu was not afraid of anyone in terms of physical strength. The god territory spread out, and the old man's body that had been sent flying was forcibly pulled back by Chu Xiu's realm. In shock, the old man's blood qi was burning, but before it could erupt, the old man was shocked to find that the blood qi around his body suddenly stagnated and flowed back into his body. In an instant, it backfired, causing him to suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood. You still dare to play with the power of qi and blood at such an old age? As Chu Xiu spoke lightly, the god territories yin and yang reversed, and the 5 elements were in disorder, forcibly tearing the old man apart. I will fight you to the death. The old man was also a ruthless character. He directly gritted his teeth, inserted his hand into his heart, and suddenly crushed his own heart. As the blood spilled, it turned pitch black, and a terrifying demon shadow bloomed from the blood. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hand. Under the old man's dying gaze, the demonic shadow he had created with a secret technique began to distort and was no longer under his control. Instead, it wrapped around his entire body, twisting and twisting as it tried to strangle him to death. In an instant, blood spilled, and the old man died without a complete corpse. Only 4 tokens and a walnut-sized soul crystal fell to the ground. Chu Xiu nodded his head in satisfaction. He was very satisfied with the creation heavenly demon power. The heavenly demon had no form, and the creation demon force was invisible. Many things could be transformed into the impossible. As long as it was an extreme yin demon qi, Chu Xiu could forcibly control it with the creation demon force. Even other forces, such as the creation demon force, could be twisted into demon qi. That old man was not of the demon path. Looking at his martial arts path, his explosive power was extremely strong, and his methods were decisive and cruel. He should be an itinerant martial artist who had fought his way up from the bottom. In just over a day, he had already killed 3 people and a demonic ghost. This efficiency could be said to be very high. Moreover, this move of his was indeed very creative. There had always been ghosts pretending to be humans, but there had never been a human pretending to be a ghost. In a special place like the Central State, coupled with the fact that he had used a secret technique to forcibly suppress his aura and make such a ghostly appearance, anyone would think that he was a demonic ghost. Moreover, when facing a demonic ghost, most people would carefully test the weakness of its true body. Almost no one would attack immediately, so it was very easy for the old man to get close and succeed in a sneak attack. Picking up the soul crystal and weighing it, Chu Xiu curled his lips in slight disdain. It was less than half a kilogram. It was too little, and he did not even have the interest to refine it. He looked at the surrounding terrain and estimated the path he had taken. After crossing this canyon and walking for a while, he would be in the hinterland of the Central State. Therefore, this old man actually had the same idea as Chu Xiu. The place he had chosen was not bad, but his strength was a little weak. In other words, he was unlucky to have encountered Chu Xiu. Therefore, Chu Xiu simply did not continue forward. Instead, he replaced the old man at the entrance of the canyon. He stabbed his saber in front of him and closed his eyes to wait. However, Chu Xiu's luck in receiving guests was not as good as that old man's. He waited for a whole day, but no one came. It was not until the second day that a burly warrior from the war-battling Immortal sect arrived. He was dressed in battle armor. The moment he saw Chu Xiu, the warrior from the war-battling sect was also stunned. The war-battling sect's Wargod Temple's Wargod Temple Master, Sikong Jialua, knew Chu Xiu, but that was only limited to the Wargod Temple's warriors who had participated in the fight for the Blessed Enclave. This warrior was not from the Wargod Temple, so he did not know Chu Xiu. However, anyone who saw this scene would find it strange. In a place like the Central State, everyone was either fighting with others or looking for someone to fight with, but this person was actually resting here with his eyes closed. What was the meaning of this? Seeing this person, Chu Xiu stretched his neck and let out a long sigh. Someone finally came. I didn't open this road, this tree? Oh, there is no tree here. In short, just hand over your token and soul crystal. The warrior from the war-battling sect was stunned, as if he could not keep up with Chu Xiu's pace. He never expected that Chu Xiu would say such a thing. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. What? You don't understand? In layman's terms, it's a robbery. The warrior from the war-battling sect smiled coldly. You dare to stand here and block the way. You have guts, but I don't know how strong you are, and if you deserve your guts. As the warrior from the war-battling sect finished speaking, his figure moved, and the power of blood and qi around him boiled violently, affecting the power of heaven and earth around him, involuntarily forming a huge storm around him. As the punch landed, a sonic boom instantly resounded between heaven and earth. With every step he took, the ground under his feet exploded into a huge crack, looking extremely horrifying. The warrior from the war-battling sect specialized in physical strength, and there were few who could rival him in the same level. Unfortunately, his opponent was Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu did not use his saber, but also threw a punch. The seemingly unchanged punch made the world stagnate in an instant, and the power of heaven and earth involuntarily poured into Chu Xiu's body. At this time, although he did not use the law embodiment of heaven and earth, and his body did not transform into a demon, his punch contained 70% of the law embodiment of heaven and earth. With a loud bang, the two fists collided, and the ground under their feet directly exploded into a huge pit of hundreds of feet. The warrior from the war-battling sect's eyes instantly changed from contempt to fear, fear of great power. On his right arm, the muscles were smashed and blood splashed. He quickly retreated, trying to remove this force. But the next moment, Chu Xiu still threw a punch. This time, he could no longer resist the punch, and was immediately blasted away, a large amount of blood spurting from his mouth. Chu Xiu walked slowly to the warrior from the war-battling sect, and said lightly, "Take it out." The warrior from the war-battling sect was aggrieved and horrified, but he was not as skilled as Chu Xiu, so what could he do? He could feel that there was no killing intent coming from Chu Xiu. It would not be worth it if he forced Chu Xiu to kill him. After all, in the central province, killing was a very common thing. The warrior from the war-battling sect only took out 2 tokens, but there were 4 soul crystals, which surprised Chu Xiu. The other party looked like a burly man, but he was actually planning to slay demonic ghosts. Remember, the person who robbed you is Chu Xiu of the eastern region. The warrior from the war-battling sect looked at Chu Xiu in shock. Only at this moment did he realize who the person in front of him was who had seriously injured him with only 2 punches. It was Chu Xiu, the one who joined forces with the Sky Devil Palace to destroy the Bliss Demon Palace of the southern region. He was Gu Zun's successor, a half-step martial immortal, and could even fight against a martial immortal if he went all out. Chu Xiu didn't know that he was quite famous in the southern region. Many people even considered Chu Xiu to be one of the most dangerous people in the competition for the Daluo Divine Palace. Although Chu Xiu wasn't a martial immortal, he was definitely in existence on the same level. The warrior from the war-battling sect was still a little indignant, but when he heard Chu Xiu's name, he immediately got up and looked for a place to heal his injuries. He was lucky to have survived Chu Xiu's attack, because Chu Xiu didn't want to kill people. Chu Xiu was here to rob people, not to be a psychopathic murderer. It would be best if he robbed these people once, killed a wave of monster ghosts, and then robbed them again. Only then would he make the best use of them. Chu Xiu didn't announce his name because he was arrogant and wanted to show off, but because he wanted his name to spread among the cultivators of the central province. When Lu Fengxian and the others heard the news, they would naturally rush over. In the days that followed, Chu Xiu continued to wait for people to come to him. If he was lucky, he would get 7 or 8 people every day, and if he was unlucky, he would get 2 or 3. Basically, there were only a handful of people who could exchange a few blows with him. There was only one person that Chu Xiu failed to rob. At noon on the 6th day, a young-looking Taoist priest who always had a smile on his face came to the front of the canyon. Looking at the messy ground caused by several battles and the faint smell of blood, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "Ghost? People? Waiting for someone? Robbery?" The young Taoist priest nodded. "Oh, I see." As soon as he said this, Taoist light swirled around him, and the 4 poles of earth, wind, water, and fire changed, distorting the laws around him like a huge black hole. Half-step martial immortal. Chapter 1248. Sowing Autumn Water had told Chu Xiu before that it was normal to run into a first heaven martial immortal in the central province. Thus, it was normal to run into a half-step martial immortal. Chu Xiu had never thought he would be able to move unhindered in the central province. However, the Taoist priest before him was indeed very young. So young that even Chu Xiu was shocked. He had not trained in some secret technique. Rather, he had reached the half-step martial immortal realm at such a young age. The young Taoist priest flung the horsetail whisk in his hand casually. However, the black hole-like power distorted everything in its path. Everywhere it passed, even the natural energy began to distort and the rules began to change. Tao techniques were natural. However, if one's cultivation in Tao techniques reached a certain level, they would be able to make it unnatural. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. The celestial domain around him suddenly burst forth. Yin and Yang were inverted as they contended against that power. Like a cannonball, Chu Xiu arrived before the young Taoist priest in an instant. His fist smashed down with the might of a landslide. The young Taoist priest smiled. "You specialize in close combat? That's perfect. I've only just mastered my mysterious technique. I'm also looking for an opponent." As soon as the young Taoist priest's voice fell, he also threw a punch. His seemingly fair and tender fist was covered in a layer of golden light at this moment. With a loud explosion, the 2 fists collided and both of them retreated several hundred feet at the same time. A gentle breeze blew past. As the breeze blew past, even the sand and stones on the ground were reduced to dust that drifted in the air. A strange expression appeared in the eyes of the 2 people. The next moment, Chu Xiu attacked with his blade. His blade intent exploded, seemingly splitting the earth. The power of his blade was ethereal and formless. A silver Taoist sword appeared in the young Taoist priest's hand. He pointed the sword forward and the power of the Tao swirled around it. The sword qi stirred the world. The blade ray collided with the sword qi. Powerful sharpness scattered in all directions once again. The blade ray and the sword qi even formed a tornado that continued to engulf everything. However, when the tornado dissipated, Chu Xiu was no longer in front of the young Taoist priest. Illusion? Very interesting. The young Taoist priest kept muttering something. At the same time, he quickly formed hand seals. The 4 extreme powers of earth, wind, water, and fire circulated around him crazily. Finally, they transformed into an energy storm that soared into the sky and scattered in all directions. The Yuan Qi storm had already engulfed everything within a radius of 1,000 feet. Although it was not strong, the area it covered was extremely wide. The young Taoist priest narrowed his eyes as he sensed everything. An illusion was just an illusion. A smoke screen could deceive the eyes and even the senses, but it still existed. He couldn't see through Chu Xiu's illusions, but the power of heaven and earth, the vital energy of heaven and earth, and the Tao of heaven and earth, could tell him where Chu Xiu was. Found it. In the next moment, the young Taoist priest made a seal with his hand. The golden light connected with his Taoist connotation and condensed into a strange rune in front of him. It even caused the void to tremble and become unstable. The celestial sealing talisman could seal immortals and suppress demons, and the Tao was supreme. In the next moment, Chu Xiu also made a seal with his hand. The sky-weeping blood rain suddenly descended around him. A huge shadow of the devil tore through the void and crushed the celestial sealing talisman. However, at the same time, the power of the celestial sealing talisman directly sealed the remaining power of the Great Compassion Mantra. The sky-weeping blood rain stopped abruptly. Chu Xiu suddenly narrowed his eyes. The violent devil qi swept around him. All the power was absorbed into his body, and his body began to expand in an instant. The young Taoist priest had been extremely calm since he appeared. It was only at this moment that he revealed a look of surprise. Magic power! After the surprise, the young Taoist priest's eyes revealed a trace of seriousness. He put away the long sword and horsetail whisk in his hand and formed an extremely complicated seal with his hands. The fluctuation of Taoist connotations spread out. In the midst of the lingering clouds and mist, a vague shadow stood between heaven and earth, overlooking all living beings in the world. Magic power, immortal tracker. As the law embodiment of heaven and earth's fist smashed down, the vague shadow in the air seemed to reach out and grab lightly. The laws of heaven and earth instantly changed, turning into countless chains that wrapped around the law embodiment of heaven and earth, preventing Chu Xiu's fist from landing. 3 breaths of time. Both sides lasted for 3 breaths of time. Although it was only 3 breaths of time, the fluctuations of power soared into the sky, looking extremely terrifying. Chu Xiu moved, withdrawing the power of the law embodiment of heaven and earth. At the same time, the young Taoist priest also dispersed the powerful shadow. The robbery failed. I can't rob you, Chu Xiu said lightly. Chu Xiu was here to rob, not to fight to the death. Although he still had many trump cards that he hadn't used, he believed that the other party was the same. The young Taoist priest shook his head and said, Actually, I also wanted to rob you, but now it seems that I can't do it either. Forget it, let's not waste any more time. Brother, I wish you a smooth robbery. We'll meet again in front of the exalted divine palace. Before leaving, the young Taoist priest cupped his fists at Chu Xiu and said, Northern region, 3 pristine palace, Fang Yizhen. Chu Xiu also cupped his fists and said, Eastern region, Chu Xiu. After the greeting, they reported their names, and a look of understanding appeared in their eyes. Chu Xiu had previously only been famous in the eastern region, but after he joined forces with the Sky Demon Palace to destroy the Bliss Demon Palace, his reputation in the Daluotian world was definitely higher than he had imagined. Although Chu Xiu had never heard of Fang Yizhen's name, the moment he heard the name 3 Pristine Palace, Chu Xiu knew that it was normal for the other party to have such strength. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the 3 Pristine Palace was the #1 sect in the Daluotian world. Therefore, it wasn't strange for a young disciple from the 3 Pristine Palace to display a cultivation of half-step martial immortal. Even if a martial immortal were to jump out now, Chu Xiu wouldn't be surprised. Fang Yizhen leisurely left, while Chu Xiu continued to wait for others. Chu Xiu's harvest in the past few days was decent, and he had accumulated over 100 tokens. However, if he wanted to enter the exalted divine palace to cultivate, he would have to increase this number by several times. At this time, in another part of the Central Plains, in a ghostly temple, sword aura rampaged, indiscriminately killing everything within sight. Even the demonic ghosts hiding in the depths were reduced to soul crystals. When the illusion dissipated, a cultivator in a green robe holding a green long sword was revealed. It was Yu Wenfu, the successor of Sword Venerable Ling Tian, who had been defeated by Chu Xiu in the past. Yu Wenfu was a person who knew shame and bravery. Since his defeat at the hands of Chu Xiu in High Heaven Sect last time, he did not have the face to return to his master's side and immediately entered retreat to cultivate. It was not until the news that the exalted divine palace was about to open ahead of schedule came that he came out. Brother Yu Wen's strength has improved again. It seems that the demons and ghosts in the Central Plains won't be able to stop you. A slightly chubby middle-aged cultivator in a brocade robe with a warm smile on his face complimented Yu Wenfu. This person was the sect master of the southern region's divine machine sect, Sikong Tan. It was not considered a large sect, only a mid-tier sect. Cultivators with families and businesses like Sikong Tan rarely came to the Central Plains to try their luck, but he was in the prime of his life and was unwilling to give up, so he came here to gamble. Yu Wenfu quickly said, "It's nothing, these are just the weakest demonic ghosts. As long as you don't get blinded by the illusions in front of you, you can kill them with your eyes closed. My master said that if you can't find the true body of a truly terrifying demonic ghost, even if you are a martial immortal, you won't be able to kill it. What a demonic ghost of that level affects is your state of mind, not a simple illusion like this." Sikong Tan shook his head and said, "If we encounter a demonic ghost of this level, we can only escape. Only an existence like Brother Yu Wen can fight it. By the way, Brother Yu Wen, before coming in, you told me to pay attention to Chu Xiu's movements, and now I've found him." Yu Wenfu immediately asked, "Where is Chu Xiu?" Sikong Tan's expression was a bit strange as he said, "Chu Xiu is currently guarding a canyon between the Central Plains outskirts and the Central Plains. He hasn't moved from that place for a long time." "What is he doing there?" "Robbing." "Robbing?" Sikong Tan nodded his head and said, "Yes, he is. That gorge is one of the only ways to reach the central region of the central state. He has already robbed quite a few martial practitioners of their tokens and soul crystals by blocking the way there." Yu Wenfu's expression darkened. Chu Xiu is a good schemer, which is in line with his personality. However, those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. This Chu Xiu is so arrogant and overbearing. Does he really think that the Central Plains belongs to his family? Sikong Tan carefully said, "Brother Yu Wen, do you really want to make a move against Chu Xiu? It's not that I'm trying to boost your morale, but Chu Xiu isn't someone easy to deal with. Not long ago, he joined hands with the Heavenly Demon Palace and destroyed the Blissful Demon Palace. He's a ruthless person who dared to raise his blade against a martial immortal. The fight for the Exalted Divine Palace is extremely dangerous. Who knows, in the end, Chu Xiu might be killed by someone or a demonic ghost before we even get to do anything." Yu Wenfu snorted coldly and said, "I've also heard about this matter. You've all raised Chu Xiu too high. The one who acted at that time was the Heavenly Demon Palace's heaven-shrouding demon hand, Yuan Kongqing. What does that martial immortal expert have to do with Chu Xiu? He's just secretly inciting those weak factions in the Southern Territory to become cannon fodder, and he only knows how to play tricks. My venerable swordsman Ling Tian's lineage isn't righteous, and my master has never taught me what patience is. He only told me that everything that I've lost, everything that I want, I'll have to rely on the sword in my hand to get it back. I'll take revenge myself. What does it have to do with me if others kill or cripple Chu Xiu?" Sikong Tan couldn't help but rub his head. Are all swordsmen so stubborn? Are their brains filled with sword qi? The people of the world's sword sect were like that, and Yu Wenfu, the successor of venerable swordsman Ling Tian, was also like that. He didn't know how to be flexible. Of course, even though he thought so, he didn't dare to say it out loud. He was the sect leader of a mid-tier sect, and it wasn't easy for him to befriend the successor of a powerful ancient venerable. He didn't dare to offend him. Chapter 1249. In Sikong Tan's opinion, Yu Wenfu wanting to make a move against Chu Xiu was a bit overestimating his own capabilities. You're both Gu Zun's successors, but Chu Xiu's reputation is much more resounding than Yu Wenfu's. Therefore, Sikong Tan could only cautiously ask, "Brother Yu Wen, you're not planning on relying on just the two of us to cause trouble for Chu Xiu, are you?" Yu Wenfu indifferently said, "Of course not. I'm not that stupid. I've already contacted Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang. When the time comes, we'll act together. Since Chu Xiu plundered so many cultivators there, he must have quite a few tokens and soul crystals on him. Given my friendship with them, they'll definitely act. I only need to promise that I'll give them all the tokens and soul crystals on Chu Xiu. They'll work even harder." Hearing Yu Wenfu say this, Sikong Tan was relieved. It seemed that Yuan Fu still had some idea of what was going on. He didn't just blindly try to kill Chu Xiu. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were both Gu Zun's successors. One was from Divine Dragon subduing General's bloodline, while the other was from Venerable Gu Yue's bloodline. It wasn't that Gu Zun's successors didn't interact with each other. They all had their own connections. Only Chu Xiu was a bit special. He'd only heard that he'd offended Gu Zun's successors, but he'd never heard of him befriending any of them. Yuan Fu said coldly, "Besides us, I've also prepared a big gift for Chu Xiu. The strongest in the Central Plains aren't humans, but ghosts. Do you still remember the ghost general we encountered?" Sikong Tan shuddered. "Of course I do. But you're not thinking of provoking that terrifying existence, are you? That's one of the few powerful ghosts in the Central Plains that can move at will. Furthermore, it's completely materialized and can smash people to death without relying on those strange illusions. Even martial immortals don't dare to provoke such a terrifying existence. If we want to lead it to Chu Xiu, I'm afraid we'll be playing with fire and burning ourselves." Yuan Fu said solemnly, "The moon-pulling spirit attraction art of Venerable Gu Yu's lineage is extremely miraculous. As long as you leave a mark on it, the demonic ghost will naturally be attracted. At the same time, you can find a chance to leave another mark on Chu Xiu's body. The demonic ghost will definitely target Chu Xiu and will not rest until he is dead. As for attracting the demonic ghosts, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do anything. Qin Jiolong and Su Jiang will do it." After Qin Jiolong cast the dragon transformation secret technique, the dragon leaped into the sky, which was enough to burst his physical body's speed to the extreme, even exceeding the level of laws. When the time comes, we won't have to worry about him being injured by the ghost general. Sikong Tan looked at Yuan Fu in astonishment. He seemed to have underestimated the successor of Sword Venerable Ling Tian. In the past, Yuan Fu was indeed incomparably arrogant. Apart from some of the ancient venerable successors and the heirs of the large sects, he didn't care about anyone else. But after being defeated by Chu Xiu in public, he seemed to have been enlightened. He did things with a bit more calculation and calmed down a lot. Entering the canyon in the heart of the central continent, Chu Xiu was still standing guard. It was already the 9th day, and there should be more people coming here. At that time, Lu Fengxian and the others should also come looking for him. At this time, two figures walked over from the distance. They were Yuan Fu and Sikong Tan. Yuan Fu stared at Chu Xiu, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. "Chu Xiu, you've been living a carefree life these days. During this time, you've snatched tokens and soul crystals from many cultivators. You've been very high profile, but have you ever thought that what you've done might end up benefiting others in the end?" Chu Xiu looked at Yuan Fu in front of him, and it took him a long time to remember who this green-clad guy was. "Your sword venerable heaven-sealing successor, Yuan Fu?" Countless Daluotian cultivators had been defeated by his hands, and this Yuan Fu was indeed not a difficult opponent for Chu Xiu. Back in the arena, Chu Xiu had easily crushed him. If it weren't for this Yuan Fu's unique appearance, Chu Xiu really wouldn't have remembered him. "It's Sword Venerable Ling Tian. Chu Xiu, you're courting death." Yuan Fu's face was filled with rage. Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter. It's fine for people like you to give titles, but you just have to go against the heavens." "What heavens sealing Ling Tian, trampling Tian? What did the heavens do to you for you to target it like this? Looking at you like this, you should know I'm here, so you're planning to bring that fatty next to you to get revenge on me? Taking the initiative to deliver a token and soul crystal to my doorstep, that's not bad. As the ancient venerable successor, you must have a lot of good things on you, right?" Sikong Tan, who was standing to the side, was stunned. Fatty? He was just a little more muscular, yet he was called a fatty? He now understood that there was a reason why Chu Xiu was so hateful. Yuan Fu coldly said, "Chu Xiu, is there any point in arguing? No one can win forever, and no one can lose forever. Last time in High Heaven Sect's martial ring, I really underestimated you, but this time I won't." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Even if you think too highly of me, you can't beat me. I advise you to hand over all the tokens and soul crystals you have on you. It will save you some time and you can go rob others." This time, Yuan Fu did not continue to bicker with Chu Xiu. Instead, he responded to Chu Xiu with a bright sword light. As the ancient venerable's successor, although Yuan Fu was beaten miserably by Chu Xiu at the beginning, it did not mean that his talent was poor. In the past, Yuan Fu had been arrogant and extreme, leaving no leeway in his actions. However, after being dealt a blow by Chu Xiu, he could be said to have learned his lesson from shame and become courageous. During these years of seclusion, he had forcibly raised his sword Dao cultivation by a large margin. The dazzling sword light instantly filled the world, illuminating the surrounding area for hundreds of feet. It was as dazzling as daytime. The sword Dao of Sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage was powerful and pure. It did not contain any different attributes, but rather, it was a pure and simple technique that brought out the most fundamental power of the sword Dao to the extreme. Chu Xiu slashed with his sword. With just one slash, he completely shattered the confidence that Yuan Fu had accumulated during this period of time. As the saber descended, the saber aura was traceless, ethereal, and formless. However, between the heavens and the earth, a boundless and powerful sharpness surged forth. This was the ethereal slash that Chu Xiu had used with all his might. Its power was almost on par with a divine ability. The sword qi that filled the sky was torn apart. The boundless sharpness wrapped around Yuan Fu, causing all the hair on his body to stand on end. Yuan Fu withdrew his sword and retreated. His entire body was shrouded in sword qi, making him look like an unsheathed sword. However, he did not slash at Chu Xiu. Instead, he used the speed of the sword qi to quickly retreat. However, the sharpness of Chu Xiu's ethereal slash followed him like a shadow. No matter how he tried to escape, the ethereal slash would always lock onto him. The next moment, the powerful saber light directly tore apart his protective sword qi and sent him flying. Yuan Fu could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Yuan Fu stood up and stared at Chu Xiu, as if he could not believe it. After such a long time, he thought that his strength had greatly increased after coming out of seclusion. In the end, the gap between him and Chu Xiu had only widened. This was something that Yuan Fu absolutely could not tolerate. Fortunately, he did not completely crumble because of this slash. Yuan Fu angrily shouted at Sikong Tan, "What are you waiting for? Waiting for me to die?" As Sikong Tan rushed towards Chu Xiu, he constantly complained in his heart. "You were the one who said that you would go up and test Chu Xiu's strength. In the end, you were almost crushed to death by a weight, and you're still blaming me?" Although Sikong Tan was a rogue cultivator and had built the Divine Machine sect from scratch, his strength was not weak. This was because no matter how good a weakling was at flattery, it was impossible for them to become friends with Yuan Fu. Because Sikong Tan's early cultivation methods were very heterogeneous, he had also researched many martial arts that were suitable for himself. At the very least, when dealing with an expert like Chu Xiu, he would not need to go head-on with him. At the very least, he would not be like Yuan Fu, who had rushed up and ended up in a miserable state. Sikong Tan's slightly fat, or rather, muscular body danced in the air. However, his body was jumping strangely, hiding between the void and reality. It looked dangerous, but he very cleverly dodged the saber light that Chu Xiu had slashed out. When Sikong Tan arrived in front of Chu Xiu, he directly raised his hand, and 5 array discs suddenly flew out, burrowing into the ground around Chu Xiu. In an instant, the array light had already risen, wrapping around Chu Xiu. In the next moment, Sikong Tan's hands formed a seal. Heaven and earth yuan qi condensed in the air, and the power of the 5 elements were like 5 chains, locking down on Chu Xiu. Interesting. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. It had been a long time since he had encountered such an interesting martial artist. Generally, when encountering this kind of martial artist with fancy martial arts, Chu Xiu's most common method was to slap them to death. His hands formed a seal, and boundless demonic qi bloomed around Chu Xiu's body. Heaven's tears and blood rain suddenly descended. The scarlet blood rain corroded the array, and the array around Chu Xiu's body did not even last for 3 breaths of time before it shattered. The giant demonic phantom tore through the air, slapping the 5 element chains to the ground with a single slap. At this time, Yuan Fu rushed over again, sword chi soaring through the air. All of his strength was condensed on the long sword in his hand. Wherever it passed, any power was torn apart by the sword chi, splitting it in half. But in the face of absolute power, it was still useless. The demonic phantom's giant palm slapped out, shattering the sword and sending Yuan Fu flying. Yuan Fu once again spat out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, Chu Xiu took a step forward, instantly arriving in front of Sikong Tan. His fist smashed down, as if a demonic god had descended, its strength incomparably terrifying. Sikong Tan let out a strange cry. His hands formed a seal, and his strength actually split the earth beneath his feet, allowing him to directly burrow underground. But the strength of Chu Xiu's fist was just too great. It was so great that the shockwaves directly blasted out a giant pit that was hundreds of feet wide, just like a small lake. It sent Sikong Tan flying out from the ground, and he also spat out a mouthful of blood as he landed beside Yuan Fu. Chapter 1250. Sikong Tan coughed up blood with a defeated expression. Looking at Yuan Fu, who was also coughing up blood, he wanted to spit blood all over his face. Yuan Fu had been acting like he had everything under control, even saying that everything was within his calculations. "You're scheming my ass. Now that the two of us are lying side by side coughing up blood, is this also within your calculations?" Actually, Yuan Fu's calculations were quite detailed, even down to what they should do at every moment. According to the previous plan, the two of them would delay Chu Xiu and engage in an intense battle, while Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang would lure the powerful demonic ghost over. By the time they had exhausted Chu Xiu and the ghost general had arrived, Su Jiang would use a secret technique to brand Chu Xiu's body and have Chu Xiu fight the ghost general to the death. But now, before Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang had even sent any news, they had made a huge mistake. They had underestimated Chu Xiu and overestimated themselves. Delaying Chu Xiu, with the difference in strength between the two sides, it would be good if they could last a few moves. Chu Xiu walked over slowly and said, "The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life. Actually, I don't really like killing people. Although you've come to find trouble with me, I'll be merciful this time. Hand over the token and soul crystals, and I'll let you live." Sikong Tan whispered to Yuan Fu, "Brother Yuan, let's forget about it for now. This Chu Xiu is too sharp and not to be trifled with. Let's return for now and think of another plan." "Forget about it. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang have already lured the ghost general over. As long as we delay Chu Xiu, we still have a chance." Sikong Tan said helplessly, "But what do we use to delay him?" "Use your life to delay him." As Yuan Fu's voice fell, a wave of blood rose around his body and fused into his sword. The sword's edge was stained with blood, and sword chi filled the air. In that instant, Yuan Fu's entire body seemed to have fused into the sword. There was no heaven, no earth, no self, but there was the sword. Yuan Fu's figure could no longer be seen in the entire world. The only thing that could be seen was a blood-red sword that seemed to be tearing the heavens and earth apart. Chu Xiu frowned. His intuition told him that something was wrong. It was true that there was hatred between him and Yuan Fu, but did Yuan Fu take the wrong medicine? He clearly didn't want to kill anyone. It was rare for him to be merciful and let him live, but he didn't run. Instead, he insisted on fighting with his life on the line. What kind of trick was this? There was no enmity between him and the man who killed his father or stole his wife. Wasn't he just defeated by me once? Is he so stubborn? Isn't this guy a little too petty? Chu Xiu's eyes flashed with killing intent when he saw the blood sword tearing through the sky and slashing towards him. It was a deep killing intent. This time, he really didn't want to kill them. He only wanted to take their money, not their lives. But since Yuan Fu wanted to court death, then he would fulfill his wish. His god domain spread out, and all the power within a few hundred meters was under his control. Yin and Yang were in chaos, and the 5 elements were inverted. All the power was under Chu Xiu's control. He continuously strangled the blood sword that was slashing towards him, revealing Yuan Fu's appearance within. The ethereal slash fell, and its extreme sharpness collided with the sword. In an instant, the powerful sharpness formed a huge storm that soared into the sky. Yuan Fu had used his blood as a guide to fuse his own power into the longsword, turning himself into a sword. This was already considered a rather extreme method among sword cultivators. Even so, this kind of power was still no threat to Chu Xiu. Sikong Tan, are you still not going to make a move? Use your divine armament formation. Yuan Fu's voice rang in Sikong Tan's ears. He had a helpless look on his face, but he had no choice but to make a move. It wasn't easy for him to befriend Yuan Fu and sneak into the circle of Prime Sovereign's successors. Today, he had to join Yuan Fu in attacking Chu Xiu. The grudge between them was already set in stone. If he didn't make a move now, not only would he offend both sides, he wouldn't benefit at all. As soon as Yuan Fu's voice fell, spots of light lit up around Sikong Tan's body. Upon closer inspection, these spots of light turned out to be small formation plates, as well as some weapon-like items. However, these items were currently being controlled by chains of astral energy, forming a strange formation. The source of these astral energy chains was none other than Sikong Tan himself. Sikong Tan was born from a humble background. In his early years, in order to accumulate financial resources, he also excelled in formations, smithing, and other things besides martial arts. Although he couldn't compare to professional smithing masters or formation masters, those people might not necessarily be stronger than him in terms of martial arts. Normally, knowing so many things would be a mess, but Sikong Tan could be considered a genius. He actually fused all these random things into one and combined them with his own martial arts to create the divine armament formation as his trump card. Densely packed formation plates and some weapon-like items appeared one after another. Only the heavens knew just how much Sikong Tan had accumulated over the years. However, these seemingly unrelated items were linked together by a secret technique. Their powers actually began to interconnect, forming a strange formation that shrouded Chu Xiu. At the same time, Yuan Fu's eyes revealed a ruthless glint. The blood and qi around him erupted once again, and the blood sword soared into the sky. In the next instant, that sharp gleam had already arrived before Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes, and the demonic aura around him erupted violently. Like a black hole, it madly absorbed all the power around it. His figure began to expand as he used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. In that instant, Chu Xiu was like a devil incarnate, incomparably terrifying. With a slap from his left hand, a powerful force directly shattered the crimson sword. A crack appeared on the long sword in Yuan Fu's hand, which expanded and finally shattered. Yuan Fu's entire person was flung through the air by the force of the palm strike. His body seemed to be on the verge of shattering, and he was completely covered in blood. At the same time, Chu Xiu's right fist smashed down, and a series of crackling sounds rang out. All the formation plates and weapons shattered under this one punch from Chu Xiu. Although Sikong Tan withdrew his hand in time and cut off the connection with those things, he was still sent flying by the wind from the punch. Like a gourd rolling on the ground, he flew backward and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He was not hurt, but rather his heart ached. These formation plates and weapons were not gang qi, which could be recovered after being used up. They were all the treasures he had accumulated over the years. But now, all of them had been destroyed by Chu Xiu. He had worked hard for over 100 years, and now he was back to where he was before. Sikong Tan wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He even felt like strangling Yuan Fu to death. Mystique. That was a mystique. It was a mystique that not even martial immortals could fully grasp, yet Chu Xiu, a Tongxin realm cultivator, was able to use it so skillfully. That was simply bullying. The two of them were simply not on the same level. How were they supposed to fight? Chu Xiu walked over with the formation plates in his hand, killing intent in his eyes. He did not ask why Yuan Fu wanted to fight him with his life on the line. To Chu Xiu, that was no longer important. He had already given them a chance to live, yet Yuan Fu was still serious and wanted to fight him to the death. Since that was the case, Chu Xiu would grant him his wish. In a fight to the death, one must have the resolve to fight to the death. No one could escape from that. Anyone who wanted to kill Chu Xiu would not be spared by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu was unable to repay enmity with kindness, but he was still able to stop killing by killing. Seeing Chu Xiu walk over with his blade in hand, brimming with killing intent, Sikong Tan was completely terrified. In the end, he used the last of his power to escape. He could not care less about Yuan Fu. That idiot was seeking death, but he did not want to stay behind and seek death with Yuan Fu. It was already a moment of life and death, so he could not care so much anymore. But just at that moment, a horrifying aura suddenly attacked. Chilling winds blew, and mournful howls could be heard. The entire sky instantly became incomparably gloomy, and the cries of gods and ghosts resounded throughout the world. Sikong Tan's eyes immediately lit up. We're saved. At that moment, Yuan Fu, who was heavily injured by Chu Xiu, was also laughing loudly as he vomited blood. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang had arrived earlier than he expected. Actually, it was not that Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were fast, but that the person behind them was too fierce, so they had no choice but to increase their speed. A golden figure in the shape of a dragon was flying in the air, and it was carrying a person. Its speed was so fast that it was like a bolt of lightning. Even with Chu Xiu's eyesight, he could only vaguely see that the other party should be a tall and sturdy man. As for the person he was carrying, it was a young man wearing a white Confucian robe. Of course, none of this attracted Chu Xiu's attention. At that moment, all his attention was focused on the thing behind them. It was an extremely horrifying existence. It was close to 10 feet tall, and it was wearing black battle armor. It held a huge crescent moon blade in its hand, which emitted a blood-red glow. There was no flesh or blood on its body, and what was exposed was layers of seemingly solid black mist. Even its face was the same, with only 2 scarlet eyes that emitted a horrifying red glow. That thing was not human, but it also did not seem like a demon ghost, because its aura was too strong, and it had already condensed into a solid form. This was completely different from the demon ghosts that Chu Xiu remembered. But in the central province, if this thing was not a demon ghost, then what was it? Wherever that thing passed, all power would be assimilated into an extremely evil power. It was not demonic qi, but more accurately, it should be ghost qi of the netherworld. Along the way, it directly left behind a long ghost domain, and even the essence of the world was repelled outside. Chen Jiolong unleashed all of his power and began to fly. It wasn't because of Yuan Fu, but because that thing was too terrifying. If he was even a bit slower and got caught by Yuan Fu, his bloodline would basically be cut off. However, when he arrived at the agreed place, he didn't see the exhausted Chu Xiu. He only saw Yuan Fu and Sikong Tan lying there miserably, which made him jump in fright. This didn't seem to be the same as what they had agreed on. Chapter 1251. The ghost general that Yuan Fu had lured over was an extremely special kind of demonic ghost. It didn't become illusory, but solid. Although it lacked the ability to invade people's hearts and create illusions, it still obtained great power. Most importantly, one of its abilities was to devour the cultivators in the outside world to make itself stronger. After cultivators died in the central province, they would become new demonic ghosts over time. After being devoured by the ghost general, they would merge with it and become even stronger. Previously, Yuan Fu and Sikong Tan had accidentally encountered this thing and were chased for 100 miles. They had only managed to escape with their lives after using their trump cards. Apart from martial immortal existences, no one else could deal with this ghost general. Therefore, Yuan Fu was confident that as long as he lured the ghost general over, Chu Xiu would undoubtedly die. Ha! Chu Xiu! You're dead! Yuan Fu laughed maniacally. As he laughed, he spat out blood. Although Chu Xiu didn't know the ghost general's background, he could tell what Yuan Fu was planning just by looking at him. A cold glint appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes as he said, "You want me to die? Then go down and wait for me." An invisible sharp edge enveloped Yuan Fu's entire body. In his current state, Yuan Fu definitely couldn't dodge Chu Xiu's misty slash. However, at this moment, Su Jiang, who had yet to arrive in front of them, suddenly began to form a hand seal. A ray of moonlight appeared in midair and engulfed Yuan Fu's body. After the moonlight flashed again, Yuan Fu's figure had already appeared beside Su Jiang. When Sikong Tan saw this scene, he simply had the urge to curse. He was also lying here, but the other party had only saved Yuan Fu. Fortunately, Yuan Fu attracted more hatred, so Chu Xiu focused most of his attention on Yuan Fu. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble. So, Sikong Tan could only curse as he ran toward them. The power of laws. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. Although the technique used by the other party was not a divine ability, it had already achieved the effect of controlling the rules, and it was even the rules of space. At this time, Yuan Fu vomited blood and said, "Quickly use the Moon Guide God technique and brand the mark on Chu Xiu's body." Su Jiang didn't make a move. Instead he asked, "Brother Yuan, were you all injured by this Chu Xiu?" Yuan Fu's expression was gloomy as he nodded and said, "I underestimated this Chu Xiu. He's much stronger than I expected. This time, I miscalculated. Fortunately, you came early. Wait, let's not talk nonsense. That ghost general is about to catch up. What are you waiting for?" Su Jiang smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Yuan, you really harmed us this time. The Moon Guide God technique is indeed bizarre, but the problem is it possible for Chu Xiu to let me leave a mark on him so easily?" Previously, you said that if you join hands with Sikong Tan, that fatty, even if you can't beat Chu Xiu, you can still exhaust most of the other party's strength. Then, I'll execute the Moon Guide God technique. In the end, Chu Xiu didn't exhaust much strength at all. Instead, it was the two of you who were heavily injured. You're also aware of my strength. Although my Guyu lineage has many secret arts, power isn't their forte. In a head-on clash, I can't even beat you, Brother Yuan. How can I fight with Chu Xiu? Yuan Fu's expression suddenly changed. He had forgotten about this point. Then what do we do now? Qin Jiolong asked in a muffled voice. With your strength, you can escape the ghost general's pursuit, Yuan Fu said gloomily. After scheming so much, even he himself suffered heavy injuries. What else could he do but run at this time? That's right, bring Sikong Tan with you. At a time like this, Yuan Fu finally remembered Sikong Tan. Seeing that, Sikong Tan's eyes brimmed with tears and the curses he gave Yuan Fu in his heart lessened slightly. Seeing Qin Jiolong escape with Yuan Fu and the others, Chu Xiu unleashed his greatest speed, turned around and ran. Yuan Fu and the others wanted to divert the trouble to him by bringing such a big guy over to deal with him. However, Chu Xiu was not stupid enough to fight head-on against a terrifying existence comparable to a martial immortal. After all, he had been plundering for long enough. It was time for him to go to the central region of the central province to test his luck. However, just at that moment, the ghost general that had been chasing after Su Jiang and the others suddenly changed direction. With a cold glint in its crimson eyes, it looked at Chu Xiu. In the next moment, Chu Xiu felt a chill from the bottom of his heart to the top of his head. He felt as if he was being locked down by some terrifying existence. The ghost general let out a furious roar that shook the 9 hells. The crimson light in its eyes shone brightly, as if a crimson will-o'-the-wisp had been ignited within them. The crescent blade in its hand abruptly slashed at Chu Xiu. In an instant, everywhere it passed turned into hell. Crap! Chu Xiu's face abruptly sank. Blood energy burst out from his body and he dodged the attack with speed. He never expected the ghost general to suddenly charge at him. Earlier, he had a vague guess that Yuan Fu wanted to use the ghost general as an excuse. However, there must have been an accident later. After they rescued Yuan Fu, they also prepared to escape. And now, the ghost general suddenly attacked him. Seeing that, Yuan Fu and the others wore dumbfounded expressions. They had no idea what was going on. On the other side, Chu Xiu had already escaped as fast as he could. However, the ghost general was still hot on his heels. In fact, it was even faster than when it was chasing Su Jiang and the others. It was obvious that the ghost general had a deep grudge against Chu Xiu. Qin Jiolong looked at Su Jiang. Brother Su, your Guyu lineage's secret technique is already so powerful. You were able to silently place a mark on Chu Xiu's body from so far away? Su Jiang was also dumbfounded. How is that possible? I didn't even make a move. Besides, if I had this kind of strength, why would I come to this place to try my luck? I could have gone back to inherit the position of Venerable Gu Yu's lineage long ago. Yuan Fu was stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly burst into laughter. However, this laughter caused him to vomit a few more mouthfuls of blood. Yuan Fu laughed as he vomited blood. I get it now. I get it now. That idiot Chu Xiu must have killed a high-grade demonic ghost that had already developed some self-awareness. Then he refined its soul crystal. High-grade demonic ghosts can naturally sense each other. Although the ghost general has undergone some changes and is different from most demonic ghosts, this aspect is still the same. He has already set his eyes on Chu Xiu. The kind that won't stop until one of us is dead. Chu Xiu had not escaped too far away. He also heard Yuan Fu's words. At this moment, Chu Xiu also had the urge to curse Zhong Qiushui's mother. Previously, Zhong Qiushui only told him that soul crystals could be refined to strengthen spiritual power and primordial spirit. However, he didn't tell him that there was a difference between low-grade and high-grade demonic ghosts. Furthermore, they couldn't be refined in the middle state. In fact, Chu Xiu had somewhat wronged Zhong Qiushui. It wasn't that Zhong Qiushui deliberately didn't want to tell him, but he himself had really forgotten. When Zhong Qiushui first entered the middle state, although he had also reached the heaven and earth mysterious realm, his strength wasn't considered strong. Simply put, he was the same as the martial artist that Chu Xiu robbed. He was the kind that accompanied Chu Xiu. Therefore, the experience he imparted was also the experience that a martial artist of that level should have. For Chu Xiu, it was a little unsuitable. Zhong Qiushui also didn't expect Chu Xiu to be so fierce. He had just entered the middle state and he had already killed a high-grade demonic ghost. He was also bold enough to refine it on the spot in such a place. Su Jiang breathed a sigh of relief. He said to Yuan Fu, "Brother Yuan, no matter what, your goal has been achieved. Let's leave for now. This Chu Xiu has been targeted by that ghost general. He will definitely not rest until he is dead." Yuan Fu said coldly, "Leave? I can't leave. I want to see Chu Xiu die before I can leave." Su Jiang immediately jumped in fright. "Brother Yuan, don't be so stubborn. No matter what, Chu Xiu will die. If you insist on staying here, what if something unforeseen happens? That's a demonic ghost, not a human. Who knows what will happen in the end?" There were many people who ended up dying because of this kind of thing. Su Jiang was cautious by nature. This time, he agreed to Yuan Fu's request. First, the two of them were indeed friends. Second, he was attracted by the many tokens on Chu Xiu. In fact, he was already a little regretful. Chu Xiu's strength was beyond imagination. The ghost general's strength was also beyond imagination. Yuan Fu snorted coldly. "Stubborn? I'm not such a stubborn person. Could it be that the two of you have forgotten about the token on Chu Xiu? The soul crystal on Chu Xiu will probably be lost. A special demonic ghost like the ghost general will devour the soul crystal. However, the tokens on his body were made by the Three Pristines Temple using a special method. Even a magic weapon can't cut it and won't be devoured. When we leave, what if someone passes by here and picks up the token? Wouldn't all the effort we've expended to get this token be given to someone else?" Su Jiang slapped his head. Only now did he remember that he still had the tokens. However, even so, they didn't dare to get too close to Chu Xiu and the ghost general. They only dared to watch carefully from a distance. At this time, the ghost general was chasing Chu Xiu relentlessly. His speed had reached an extreme. Chu Xiu had many martial arts, but he didn't have any secret skills related to speed. That was not a flaw. After all, Chu Xiu's fleshly body was very powerful. Relying on the power of his fleshly body, he was able to burst forth with astonishing speed. Furthermore, he possessed many secret techniques. It would not be easy for others to escape from him. But the problem was that when he was chasing others, he was now being chased by others. Other than using the blood demon transformation technique and escaping with the blood escape, Chu Xiu had no other choice. However, using the blood demon transformation art would be equivalent to putting his life on the line. Even if Chu Xiu could escape, he would need half a month to recuperate and restore his vitality. Setting aside the fact that he didn't have a safe place to recuperate for half a month, the Exalted Divine Palace contest would only last for a month. If he wasted half of that time, it would be too late. Chu Xiu abruptly turned around, fighting spirit burning in his eyes. So what if he was a high-ranked demonic ghost general? He'd already killed one before, so he didn't mind killing a second. Chapter 1252. The Ghost General was very powerful. At the very least, from what Chu Xiu could sense, it was even stronger than some martial immortals. However, it remained that the Ghost General was a demonic ghost, an evil ghost. With the Cross Lotus Seal, Chu Xiu was still able to put up a fight against such an evil ghost. Thus, the instant he turned around, Chu Xiu formed a Cross Lotus Seal with his hand. Powerful Buddhist light blossomed. As the Cross Lotus Seal bloomed, the holy Buddhist light purified the power of the netherworld before him. The image of a Buddha appeared behind Chu Xiu. Buddhist chants descended, making Chu Xiu appear incomparably holy. In the next moment, the Ghost General let out a miserable howl. Black fog surrounded its body, and its entire body was sent flying. The black fog dispersed, leaving only a suit of armor standing upright in its original position. Su Jiang and the others were stunned by that scene. What happened to the promised high-level demonic ghost general? What happened to the promised power to defeat martial immortals? Earlier, it was so ferocious in its pursuit of them. Why was it unable to even block a single attack from Chu Xiu? This isn't right. At that moment, Sikong Tan was cursing in his heart. This Yuanfu is simply incapable of accomplishing anything, but good at spoiling things. He insisted on staying here to watch. And now, he ended up causing trouble. However, Chu Xiu still had a serious expression on his face. Following Chu Xiu's increase in strength, the Cross Lotus Seal's power had become even stronger than before. However, the seal earlier only managed to disperse the black fog around the Ghost General. That said, Chu Xiu could still sense the Ghost General's aura. Sure enough, as the power of the Cross Lotus Seal dissipated, the surrounding netherworld Ghost General condensed back into a solid form and gathered within the Ghost General's armor. The Ghost General took a step forward, causing the entire earth to tremble. The crescent moon blade slashed down with incomparable might. A loud clang rang out. Chu Xiu's blade slashed down. However, it was sent flying by the overwhelming power. His opponent was an existence comparable to a martial immortal. At the very least, his strength was around that of a level 2 martial immortal. It was simply not something that the current Chu Xiu could take on. And this was not the end. Chu Xiu could feel that every time Gui Jiang attacked, the heaven-earth yuan qi around him became thinner and was replaced by the cold ghost qi of the netherworld. Although those ghost generals were not martial immortals, they were existences capable of affecting the laws of heaven and earth. However, martial immortals were active, while ghost generals were passive. The ghost general roared and slashed down again and again. Chu Xiu dodged and dodged, but was sent flying again and again. He took a deep breath and released his god domain, enveloping the ghost general in the middle. Although the power of the celestial domain could destroy the netherworld ghost chi around the ghost general, the speed at which the ghost general recovered was even faster. It was impossible to cause any effective damage to the ghost general. But right at this moment, the attributes in the god territory changed in an instant. The misty chaotic energy turned into an extremely dazzling Buddha light. Under the illumination of the Buddha light, the power around the ghost general instantly began to evaporate. However, it was clear that although the power of the ordinary Buddha light could restrain the ghost general's power, it could not completely injure him like the cross-shaped lotus seal. Therefore, the ghost general braved the pressure of being burned by the Buddha light and looked at Chu Xiu. In an instant, the scarlet light shone brightly. Like two sharp swords, it shot into Chu Xiu's mind, causing him to groan. At this moment, illusions appeared in Chu Xiu's mind. It was as if he had fallen into a boundless sea of blood. Hungry ghosts tore at him, and the Yin wind eroded his bones. The feeling was extremely real. Fortunately, Chu Xiu had refined the soul crystal of a high-level demonic ghost. His mental strength and the power of his primordial spirit had skyrocketed, so it only took him a few breaths to remove himself from the illusion. Of course, if Chu Xiu had not refined the soul crystal, he would not have been targeted by the ghost general. It could only be said that everything was fate. As soon as he regained consciousness, the ghost general's crescent blade was already slashing towards him. The blade carried great power, and wherever it passed, it turned into a path of the netherworld. The ghost general did not have many tricks up his sleeves. Most of the time, it just slashed down monotonously. However, the power of each slash was not something that Chu Xiu could take head-on. He was forced to retreat step by step. Suddenly gritting his teeth, Chu Xiu formed another seal. The cross-shaped lotus seal blasted out again. Under the purification of the Buddha light, the black mist in the ghost general's armor was once again shattered. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not retreat. Instead, he took the opportunity to take the initiative to advance. The blade in his hand shone brightly, and the 7 limits, misty slash, and the blade intent of the word break slashed down one after another, bombarding the ghost general's armor. After the black mist in the ghost general's armor was shattered, it could still gather again. Therefore, Chu Xiu suspected that there was a problem with the armor. He wanted to try and shatter it directly to see if the ghost general could gather again. After the breaking formation was integrated with Listen to Spring Rain, it could be said to be the best of the best magic weapons. In terms of pure sharpness, even Listen to Spring Rain at its peak was not as good as the breaking formation. The ghost general's armor was formed from the armor and weapons of the warriors who had died in the Central Plains over the years. Naturally, its material was not as good as the breaking formation. Therefore, under such a violent slash by Chu Xiu, before the ghost general could gather again, the armor had already shattered. However, a scene that Chu Xiu could not accept appeared. After the black mist returned to the ghost general's body, 2 rays of scarlet light bloomed. Tentacle-like objects extended out of the black mist, hooking onto the fragments of the battle armor and pulling them back into the ghost general's body. Under the effect of the black mist, the battle armor fused together and did not seem to be damaged at all. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's heart suddenly sank. He had guessed wrong. The ghost general's weak point was not the armor. The armor was the same as the black mist. As long as there were fragments, it could continue to recover. Seeing that the ghost general slashed again, Chu Xiu did not hesitate and continued to smash the cross-shaped lotus seal. This time, Chu Xiu did not attack the armor. Instead, he took advantage of the critical moment when the black mist disappeared to form the Vairocana seal in his hand. He directly smashed it towards the scarlet eyes, and in an instant, a powerful Buddhist light enveloped it. A mournful howl came from within the black mist. Clearly, this attack had injured the demonic ghost quite badly. However, even though the scarlet eyes were no longer there, the black mist began to condense again and appeared inside the armor. The only difference was that after the body reformed, the scarlet light in the ghost general's eyes dimmed a little, and it was not as strong as before. This scene made Chu Xiu's heart sink to the bottom. Attacking the scarlet eyes was useful. It was definitely a weak point of the ghost general. However, the problem was that he had already used his mystique to destroy the ghost general's eyes once, but the ghost general could still revive. It was just that its aura was slightly weaker than before, but not by much. On the other hand, Chu Xiu could not hold on much longer. The mystique of the cross-shaped lotus seal consumed much less energy than the ordinary mystiques he had, especially when facing evil ghosts like the ghost general. It was actually very worthwhile. However, the problem was, how many more times could Chu Xiu use the cross-shaped lotus seal? Even though the cross-shaped lotus seal consumed less energy than other mystiques like the lawful manifestations of heaven and earth, it was not so little that Chu Xiu could use it like an ordinary technique. If this were to continue, he would definitely be the first one to be exhausted to death. With the eyesight of Yuan Fu and the others, they could clearly tell that Chu Xiu was currently in an extremely awkward situation. His Buddhist mystique was truly astonishing. It was capable of taking on a martial immortal-level demonic ghost general head-on. However, the demonic ghost general was not that easy to deal with. Being able to take on the demonic ghost general did not mean that one could kill it. Looking at Chu Xiu's repeated failures, Yuan Fu's eyes revealed a smug look. Even though all sorts of variables had appeared in his plan, the final result was still the same. At that moment, Chu Xiu was indeed in an incomparably wretched state. Using the cross-shaped lotus seal 3 times in a row had consumed as much energy as using the complete lawful manifestations of heaven and earth. Even though Chu Xiu still had the clear sky reflecting shadow as his trump card, he did not dare to use it. The reason for that was because Chu Xiu was not confident that he would be able to kill the demonic ghost general after using the clear sky reflecting shadow. This thing was simply too strange. Even though the demonic ghost general's attack method and form were completely different from the demonic ghosts that Chu Xiu had encountered before, their core was the same. Every single demonic ghost general had a fatal weakness. Before the weakness could be found, the demonic ghost general would be incomparably powerful. However, once the weakness was found, the demonic ghost general would be able to easily kill it. However, the problem was, which part of the demonic ghost general's weakness was it? It could not be killed, it could not be smashed, and its strength was equivalent to that of a martial immortal level expert. It simply did not have any weaknesses. In fact, even if a martial immortal level expert came, it would be easy to escape. However, to kill the monster would be incomparably difficult. At that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something that he had overlooked the entire time. Actually, the weakness of the demonic ghost general was very obvious. It should be said that its weakness had always been in front of him, in front of everyone. However, due to the demonic ghost general's enormous body and frightening strength, everyone had subconsciously overlooked it. Even though Chu Xiu did not dare to say that he was 100% certain, he was at least 90% certain that he could kill the demonic ghost general. When the demonic ghost general swung its crescent blade down again, Chu Xiu suddenly formed hand seals. Then, the primordial spirit behind him began to shine with dazzling golden light. In an instant, it shone in the sky and pierced into the black fog. An endless amount of blackness completely enveloped Chu Xiu's primordial spirit. It was the aura of death, the extremely gloomy ghostly energy of the netherworld. It was continuously corroding Chu Xiu's primordial spirit. However, Chu Xiu acted as if he did not notice it in the slightest. Controlling his primordial spirit, he continued to swim towards the deepest part of the ghostly energy of the netherworld. At the deepest part of the ghostly energy of the netherworld was a scene of purgatory. Looking at it, Chu Xiu could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Chapter 1253. In the deepest part of the netherworld ghostly aura, countless figures were crowded together. Some of their limbs were so twisted that they no longer resembled humans. These people gathered together and were all infected by the ghostly aura of the netherworld. Their expressions were incomparably hideous as they let out miserable howls. Those people, or rather, those ghosts, were all Daluotian cultivators who had been devoured by the ghost general over the years. The ghost general was special in that after the other demonic ghosts killed people, their primordial spirits would not be devoured. Instead, they would gradually be assimilated by the distorted laws of the central province and become terrifying demonic ghosts. Furthermore, those who had been devoured by the ghost general were gathered here and became part of the ghost general. However, what Chu Xiu found was not them. Instead, at the very center of the group, there was a burly man wrapped in black qi. He was wearing the battle armor of the martial god sect, and his primordial spirit was still intact. But when he saw Chu Xiu, his expression turned hideous and he frantically tried to break free from the black qi around him. His mouth only shouted 3 words, "Kill me! Kill me! Hurry up and kill me!" The weak power of his primordial spirit approached Chu Xiu. It did not pose any threat, but when Chu Xiu saw the information contained in it, he could not help but shake his head. The burly man before him was not a demonic ghost, but he was the core of the demonic ghost. From the power of his primordial spirit, Chu Xiu saw the entire process of the Ghost General's birth. This burly man was a hall master of the martial god sect 3,000 years ago. After entering the central province, he was killed by a high-rank demonic ghost. Actually, this was all fate. Every time the Daluotian world opened, it would be good if half of the cultivators who entered survived. A portion of them died at the hands of other cultivators, while the rest died at the hands of demonic ghosts. Under normal circumstances, this burly man should have been assimilated into a demonic ghost. However, he had an ancient treasure in his possession that could preserve his primordial spirit. The power of the central province wanted to assimilate his primordial spirit, but it was stopped by the treasure. But this was not a good thing. The power within the central province was the distortion of the laws created by the connection between the two worlds. It was a power that not even martial immortals could resist or control. Therefore, even though the twisting power did not completely turn the burly man into a demon ghost, it continued to gather power on the outside, wrapping his entire body in it. That power grew stronger and stronger, and in the end, it even developed its own consciousness and became a ghost general. Then, as the ghost general killed more and more people, the devouring power became stronger and stronger. The warriors of the war god sect had no hope of escaping. Although his soul was protected by a treasure, allowing him to preserve the last sliver of his true spirit, he would forever be surrounded by countless evil spirits and corroded by the ghostly aura of the netherworld. Therefore, this warrior of the warring martial god sect could only be said to be in a state where he could neither live nor die. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have let the demonic ghost kill him and have his nascent soul dissipate and assimilate with it. That way, he wouldn't have been tortured like this. After so many years, Chu Xiu was the first person to reach the deepest part of his primordial spirit. In the past, when other people faced the Ghost General, they saw its powerful power and the way it fought different from other demonic ghosts. They subconsciously treated it as a special existence. However, they neglected the fact that in a place like the Central Province, the power of the laws could distort all primordial spirits into demonic ghosts. Although the Ghost General's power was special, it was still a demonic ghost. Therefore, its weakness was naturally the same. If one could find its core and destroy it in one blow, they would be able to kill it completely. The Ghost General instinctively sensed the threat posed by Chu Xiu. In an instant, the ghostly aura of the netherworld surged and seeped into the densely packed primordial spirit. In an instant, countless ferocious-looking evil spirits roared and attacked Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu only formed a seal. Cross-shaped lotus seal. Among the remarkable skills that Chu Xiu had, the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth were inherited from the statue and not comprehended by himself. The clear sky illuminating shadow was inherited from Dugu Weiwei and not comprehended by himself. Only the cross-shaped lotus seal was successfully comprehended by activating the power of the Subhuti treasure tree. Although the Subhuti treasure tree was the key, it was only a catalyst. The one who truly manifested the remarkable skill was Chu Xiu himself. Therefore, of the three remarkable skills, the one that Chu Xiu could truly master was the cross-shaped lotus seal that belonged to the Buddhist sections. Although Chu Xiu was in the form of a primordial spirit, this remarkable skill had already been engraved into his true spirit. Even if he was in the form of a primordial spirit, he could still use it. In the next moment, a holy and dazzling Buddhist light shone brightly, purifying and dispersing everything. The cross-shaped lotus seal bloomed, the ghostly aura of the netherworld dissipated, and the true spirits dissipated. When the cross-shaped lotus seal bloomed to its peak, the remaining true spirit of the war god sect cultivator was purified by the power and began to dissipate. However, although his primordial spirit dissipated, there was no sign of pain in his eyes. There was only a look of relief. The war god sect cultivator bowed at Chu Xiu, thanking him for freeing himself. At the same time, the moment he completely dissipated, a weak primordial spirit message was transmitted to Chu Xiu. After checking the message, Chu Xiu raised his brows and said, "You're very particular about the person." Although Chu Xiu had only wanted to kill the Ghost General and had not specifically come to free him, the War God sect cultivator still gave Chu Xiu a gift of gratitude in the end. He was originally the hall master of a hall in the War God sect. He was already a half-step martial immortal, and had a chance of making a breakthrough to the martial immortal realm after entering the central province. However, before he could make a breakthrough to the martial immortal realm, he discovered a treasure left behind by a predecessor, which attracted many experts to fight over. In the end, although he won, he was seriously injured. In the end, before he could find a place to recuperate, he unfortunately encountered a high-level demonic ghost and died there. The message he gave to Chu Xiu was the place where he died, where his remains and the treasures he had obtained were located. However, there was a high-level demonic ghost there. As long as Chu Xiu could kill it, he would be able to obtain the treasures. Looking at the ghostly aura of the netherworld that was collapsing and dissipating around him, Chu Xiu's primordial spirit shone brightly and returned to his body. However, the moment his primordial spirit returned to his body, Chu Xiu's face turned as pale as a dead man's. Although the cross-shaped lotus seal was a divine ability, it did not consume too much energy. If Chu Xiu were to use it with his physical strength, he would definitely be able to endure it. However, he had only used the power of his primordial spirit to cast the cross-shaped lotus seal. Even with Chu Xiu's current primordial spirit, he would not be able to endure the consumption. At that moment, Yuan Fu and the others were dumbfounded. They didn't know what happened inside the Ghost General. They only saw a flash of golden light. It seemed to be a primordial spirit-type attack. Then, the Ghost General started dissipating. It wasn't a temporary dissipation like before. It was a true dissipation. The ghostly aura of the netherworld drifted in the air, then completely disappeared. The armor and weapons left behind by the Ghost General also crumbled, turning into some ordinary armor and weapons. There was only a soul crystal left, a huge soul crystal the size of a human head. Yuan Fu and the others all widened their eyes, expressions of disbelief on their faces. They simply thought they were seeing an illusion. They had faced that Ghost General before, so they knew how powerful it was. Precisely because of that, they were confident that Chu Xiu would definitely die by its hands. However, who would have thought that the powerful Ghost General, whose strength was comparable to the first or second level of martial immortal, would die by Chu Xiu's hands? He died in such a strange way. On the side, Sikong Tan cautiously said, "Brother Yuan, let's quickly leave. Otherwise, when Chu Xiu recovers, we will be in trouble." As Yuan Fu vomited blood, he tightly clenched his fists. Suddenly, he coldly said, "Leave? Leave for what? After spending so much effort, you and I are heavily injured, and even risk danger to lure the Ghost General over. If we leave just like that, wouldn't that be a joke? Although I don't know what method Chu Xiu used to kill the Ghost General, just look at his current appearance. He's definitely not in a good state. After fighting a fierce battle with us, and then using all his power to kill the Ghost General, Chu Xiu is already an arrow at the end of its flight. Sikong Tan, you still have battle power. Brother Chen and Brother Su are also unharmed. 3 peak profound understanding realm existences going to kill an exhausted Chu Xiu. How could they not kill him? Sikong Tan had already cursed Yuan Fu in his heart countless times. Right now, he felt that Yuan Fu was a jinx. Every time he swore that he was certain of something, there would definitely be an accident. Just like before when he dragged him to stall Chu Xiu, wanting to exhaust the other party, but in the end? You still have the nerve to say that it was a fierce battle? It was clearly a beating, and the other party didn't even break a sweat. After that, he asserted that the Ghost General would definitely be able to kill Chu Xiu, and they watched anxiously. In the end, he was killed, but it was Chu Xiu who killed the Ghost General. Now, Yuan Fu was actually dragging him to fight. Sikong Tan was really afraid. He was afraid of Chu Xiu's strength, Chu Xiu's unfathomable depth, and he was afraid that Yuan Fu's jinx would take effect again. At this time, Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were also hesitating. They didn't have any enmity with Chu Xiu. It was only because of their friendship with Yuan Fu, and because they were attracted by the large number of tokens and soul crystals on Chu Xiu, that they made a move. Chu Xiu had been robbing unscrupulously for so long, but he didn't know that in the eyes of others, he was also a very good target to rob. But when Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong saw that Yuan Fu was actually injured so badly, and that even the ghost general died at the hands of Chu Xiu, they were a little uncertain. Even though they hadn't fought with Chu Xiu directly, they could still feel the powerful pressure. At this time, Chu Xiu recovered a little. He reached out and the ghost general's soul crystal was put into his bag. At the same time, Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Yuan Fu and the others, and the corner of his mouth pulled into a cold and creepy smile. "You didn't leave? That's good, you don't have to leave anymore." Chapter 1254. Aura was a very mysterious thing. At the very least, Sikong Tan could clearly feel that Chu Xiu had a kind of aura that made him shudder. He didn't think that he was afraid, but that his opponent was too strong, so strong that he didn't even have the courage to attack. He didn't leave just now, but now he couldn't. Killing intent rose in Chu Xiu's eyes. These guys had caused him a lot of trouble. If he didn't kill them now, when would he? Yuan Fu had succeeded, successfully arousing Chu Xiu's killing intent. The people he wanted to kill usually wouldn't be left until the next day. The misty slash down with absolute blade intent, its sharpness making everyone's hearts tremble. Yuan Fu shouted, "This Chu Xiu is already so arrogant that he wants to drive us out. If we don't attack now, when will we?" Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang looked at each other, then put the heavily injured Yuan Fu aside, and the two of them went straight for Chu Xiu. Chen Jiolong's body shone with a strong golden light. With a dragon's roar, he seemed to have transformed into a soaring dragon, fighting against the heavens. As his claw descended, he actually used his physical body to take on Chu Xiu's misty head-on. Bursts of exploding blade light resounded around him, the sharpness scattering in all directions. Chen Jiolong came from the divine dragon subduing general's bloodline, and was most proficient in physical cultivation. Moreover, his bloodline's dragonization secret technique had gained 30% of the Azure Dragon's charm, and was always successful in close combat. But as he took on Chu Xiu's blade light head-on, Chen Jiolong's expression suddenly changed. The extreme sharpness tore through the scales formed from stellar energy around his body, and he was almost instantly killed. "Su Jiang!" Chen Jiolong shouted. Behind him, Su Jiang formed a hand seal, and moonlight shone on Chen Jiolong's body. In an instant his body turned into a strange illusory state, and with a leap, he rushed towards Chu Xiu like a swimming dragon. The dragon subduing divine general's lineage and venerable Gu Yu's lineage had actually been in contact for a long time. Not only were Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang good friends, but their ancestors had also been good friends for thousands of years. The dragon subduing divine general's lineage specialized in body tempering and close combat. Venerable Gu Yu's lineage, on the other hand, was proficient in all kinds of strange secret techniques. Their close combat abilities were not considered strong. Therefore, once the two of them joined forces, they complemented each other and their battle prowess would multiply. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang had known each other since they were young. They grew up together and cultivated together even before they roamed the Jianghu. Now that they were fighting Chu Xiu together, they seemed to have a tacit understanding with each other. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed coldly when he saw Chen Jiolong's approaching figure. He had only overexerted his primordial spirit, but he still had a lot of power left in him. Facing Chen Jiolong, Chu Xiu slashed out once again. However, with the support of the moonlight, Chen Jiolong's movements seemed to have distorted the laws of this area, causing the ethereal slash to miss. "Die!" Chen Jiolong bellowed, and the dark red aura on his dragon claw tore through the void. The dragon fought in the wild, its blood yellow. It was an extreme blood chi that was even sharper than the edge of a blade. At this moment, Su Jiang formed a hand seal and a half-moon rose into the sky. Under the illumination of the moonlight, black shadows rose from under Chu Xiu's feet and wrapped around him, making him unable to move. Just as Chen Jiolong's dragon claw landed, Chu Xiu finally moved. It was a simple punch, but the powerful force exploded to the extreme. With a loud bang, the golden light around Chen Jiolong shattered, and his dragon form was directly destroyed. At this moment, Chen Jiolong's eyes widened. Even though his internal organs had been shaken by the powerful force of Chu Xiu's punch, he still could not believe that Chu Xiu was stronger than him in terms of strength. He was so much stronger than him. In fact, Chen Jiolong felt that his physical strength was powerful only because he felt good about himself. There was no need to mention Chen Qingdi. After refining the demon god's blood, Chu Xiu's strength had almost reached a state where he was invincible under the martial immortal realm. Although Chen Jiolong's physical body was strong, even stronger than the warriors of the war-fighting divine sect at the same level, there was still a huge gap between him and Chu Xiu. At the same time, Chu Xiu's celestial domain bloomed and the black shadows around him were instantly killed. He moved and directly charged at Su Jiang. Between the two, Chen Jiolong was actually the easiest to deal with. However, with Su Jiang beside him, it would be extremely difficult to deal with him. Therefore he killed Su Jiang first. Chen Jiolong could kill him with a wave of his hand. The saber light slashed down. In shock, Su Jiang's body turned into a shadow of the moon and dissipated, causing his saber to miss. However, the next moment, Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hand. In an instant, the tears of heaven blood rains suddenly descended. The powerful force enveloped the space within hundreds of feet. Under the blood rain, the moonlight was suppressed to the extreme and could no longer help Su Jiang hide his body. The void was torn apart. The huge shadow of the demon god stretched out its hand and grabbed at Su Jiang. Su Jiang looked like he was holding the moon in his arms. The silver full moon blocked in front of him and shone brightly. The cold moonlight was purifying the power of the Great Compassion Mantra. The power in the moonlight was not the power of Taoism or Buddhism to suppress evil and kill demons. Instead, it was a very strange power that was constantly assimilating different kinds of power. If Su Jiang's move was used against warriors of the same level, it would be a very strong move. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu's power was too strong. Su Jiang could no longer resist the power of the Great Compassion Mantra. Sweat appeared on his forehead. Seeing that Su Jiang could no longer resist, Chen Jiolong immediately gritted his teeth and rushed toward Chu Xiu, ignoring the pain of his internal organs being shaken. His body transformed into a dragon, like a flying dragon in the sky. The attack from the sky directly brought about a powerful storm, letting out a series of dragon-like roars. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute power, it was still useless. It was still a simple punch with extreme power. In an instant, it sent Chen Jiolong flying backward, and the dragon-shaped qi on his body collapsed. Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong were definitely not weak. It could be said that they were not bad when facing disciples from top sections. It was a pity that they met Chu Xiu. For the current Chu Xiu, even if his condition was not good, he no longer cared about the existence of the ordinary mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Unless he encountered people like Xen Jialua or Fang Yizhen of the Three Pristines Palace, Chu Xiu would really treat them as an opponent. Su Jiang gritted his teeth and shouted. His primordial spirit was seriously injured in the battle with Gui Jiang before. If I can use that move to break his defense, I can use the Moon Leading Soul technique to seriously injure his primordial spirit again. When Chen Jiolong heard this, he immediately knew which move Su Jiang was talking about. In an instant, he formed a seal with his hands, and his qi and blood erupted all over his body. On his exposed skin, layers of muscle patterns appeared in a strange manner, like scales. At the same time, Su Jiang also formed a seal with his hand, and the power of his gang qi and primordial spirit bloomed to the extreme, releasing waves of silver-white moonlight. His entire body was enveloped in the moonlight, as if a full moon had suddenly risen in the sunless central state. In the next moment, all the moonlight was injected into Chen Jiolong's body. In an instant, the moon danced and the dragon soared. This was no longer the form of gang qi, but a real dragon. With the moon as the dragon's soul, and Chen Jiolong's body as the dragon's body, under the moon danced and the dragon soared, Chen Jiolong's figure could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a lifelike dragon that was hundreds of feet long, bringing with it the bright and cold moonlight, surging towards Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said softly, "Magic power, interesting." What Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were using now was a magic power, and it was a real magic power. Among the Daluotian people, except for abnormal people like Chu Xiu, it was actually very difficult for most normal warriors to master a magic power at the mysterious Enlightenment realm. This was because they could not withstand the power of the magic power's backlash, and even if they had mastered it, they did not dare to use it. But Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were very creative. They actually divided a magic power into two halves, cultivated it separately, and then used it together. In this way, the two of them could bear the backlash together, and they could use the magic powers smoothly like now. However, this required them to have a tacit understanding with the other party. Otherwise, the slightest bit of difference would make it impossible to succeed. But when he thought of the two men who had grown up together, were childhood sweethearts, and cultivated together, and even had to cultivate to the point of tacit understanding, Chu Xiu felt a little awkward. Facing a magic power attack, Chu Xiu was still letting his imagination run wild. This action was not because he was underestimating his opponent, but because he was confident. In the next moment, he used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, and everything around him was devoured by Chu Xiu. When the thousands of feet tall demon gods stood between the heavens and the earth, and even reached into the central ground's array formation, the dragon that Chen Jiolong had transformed into could only be considered a small loach at most. As Chu Xiu's fist landed, he was directly sent flying hundreds of feet away. The dragon disappeared, and the moon disappeared. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang coughed up blood at the same time, their eyes filled with horror. On the other side, Yuan Fu saw that the two of them were still being beaten up by Chu Xiu. Even if they used their trump cards, it would still be the same as before. He couldn't help but turn back and yell at Sikong Tan, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack?" Seeing that both sides had even used their magic powers, Sikong Tan completely broke down. He had been cursing Yuan Fu the whole way, and now he finally let it out. "Attack your grandma's balls. You idiot arrogant fool, did your brain get kicked by a donkey or squeezed by a door? Or were you born malnourished? You only know how to attack. Do you think you can beat him? If you're tired of living and want to die, I still have more than 10 wives and concubines. I don't want my son to take someone else's surname in the future." After cursing, Sikong Tan's figure moved, and he directly turned to escape, leaving behind a stunned Yuan Fu. However, before he could escape too far, a strange domain directly wrapped around him. The power of time in that domain seemed to have been messed up, and he couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. Suddenly, a slap came over, blasting him into the ground. An old man who looked like an old farmer with his hands behind his back slowly descended from midair. He said indifferently, "Little fatty, where do you think you're going?" Chapter 1255. The cultivator who had slapped Sikong Tan down was Shang Tianyang. Half-step martial immortal was like a fish in water, even in the central province. Therefore, Shang Tianyang did not encounter any danger during this period of time. He did not encounter any powerful high-grade demonic ghosts like Chu Xiu did. When he encountered Shang Tianyang, he had wanted to go to the central province's hinterland for a while. However, he happened to hear news about Chu Xiu. He had originally gone to the valley to find Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu was no longer there. All he saw were traces of battle. However, Shang Tianyang was not anxious. He believed in Chu Xiu's strength. Besides, good people do not live long. Scourges live for 1,000 years. He did not believe that someone like Chu Xiu would die here so easily. As expected, by the time he arrived, everything was over. Only a few pitiful fellows who were beaten up by Chu Xiu were left. Sikong Tan collapsed. Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong also collapsed when they saw Shang Tianyang. One Chu Xiu was already so difficult to deal with. Now, there was another half-step martial immortal. He was clearly on the same side as Chu Xiu. How were they supposed to fight him? There was no way. Therefore, Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong quickly looked at each other. In an instant, the two of them made a decision. Su Jiang formed hand seals and poured the last of his moonlight power into Chen Jiolong's body. Chen Jiolong's physical strength instantly soared to the limit. Chen Jiolong leaped forward and unleashed his power to the limit. As he brought Su Jiang along, he extended his hand and pulled Yuan Fu along with him. The two of them were quite loyal. They did not forget Yuan Fu. Although Yuan Fu was not as close to them as they were good friends who had known each other for many years. They could not bear to leave Yuan Fu here alone. Besides, swordsman Ling Tian's faction had always been unreasonable. If they really left Yuan Fu here to fend for himself, Yuan Fu's master might come looking for trouble with their sect. Lord Shang stopped them. At the very least, leave the heavily injured one behind. Chu Xiu shouted in a low voice. The moment he used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu's own strength was almost depleted. Therefore, he did not give chase because he could not catch up. Fortunately, Shang Tianliang had arrived. With his half-step martial immortal cultivation, it would be very easy for him to stop them. However, Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang also knew that as long as they stayed, they would really die. Therefore, the two of them immediately began to flee. Chen Jiolong burned his blood essence, pushing his physical strength to a new peak. The golden dragon had already turned into a blood dragon. Su Jiang did the same. He directly ignited his blood essence, turning the silvery white moonlight into a blood-red color and infusing it into Chen Jiolong's body. In the blink of an eye, the two's speed had increased by a large margin. Stay here for I. The withering glory domain spread out, and the power of time began to reverse. Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong were horrified to discover that the power within their bodies seemed to be out of their control and began to burn violently. Throw Yuan Fu away. Su Jiang, who had always been gentle, suddenly shouted. Chen Jiolong was taken aback. Without any hesitation, he threw Yuan Fu to the ground. The two of them borrowed the explosive power of the withering glory domain to instantly leap forward. In a single leap, they had escaped the range of Shang Tianliang's domain, disappearing without a trace. Shang Tianliang was taken aback, unable to react. He also did not expect the two of them to have such explosive power. He was unable to completely burn their power, and instead allowed them to borrow the power of the withering glory domain to instantly bloom and escape. At that moment, Shang Tianliang looked behind him. The fatty that he had slapped to the ground earlier had also disappeared. Looking closely, there was actually a hole in the ground. Xikong Tan had actually used a secret technique to escape while Shang Tianliang was chasing Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang. There was a total of 4 people. One had already been crippled by Chu Xiu, and the other 3 had been half-crippled by Chu Xiu. In the end, only one was left crippled by Shang Tianliang. That made Shang Tianliang feel a little embarrassed and he wanted to give chase. City Lord Shang, there's no need to chase after them. Let them go. Right now, Chu Xiu's power and primordial spirit were severely depleted, and he urgently needed to recover. Moreover, the central province was full of danger. There was no point in chasing at this time, and it would only lead to accidents. Shang Tianliang snorted coldly. Give I time, and none of those 3 brats will be able to escape. Chu Xiu gave Shang Tianliang a way out. He nodded in agreement as he walked towards Yuan Fu. Seeing Chu Xiu walking towards him with killing intent, Yuan Fu was terrified, but he did not beg for mercy. He was the successor of Gu Zun, the successor of swordsman Ling Tian's bloodline. He could plot to kill Chu Xiu, and he could also lose, but he could not beg for mercy. Therefore, even under the fear of death, Yuan Fu still did not beg for mercy. Instead, he unyieldingly threatened, Chu Xiu, before you kill me, think carefully. With a soft sound, the formation-breaking sword pierced into Yuan Fu's heart. The sharp aura instantly shattered his heart meridians. Do I need to think about killing you? Shang Tianliang finally noticed Chu Xiu's current state. His primordial spirit and power were almost completely depleted. Although he was not seriously injured, he had already overdrawn his power. These 4 fellows actually forced you into such a state? Shang Tianliang was curious. Logically speaking, this should not be the case. With Chu Xiu's current strength, as long as he did not encounter a half-step martial immortal, he was practically invincible among his peers. Chu Xiu did not say a word. He only took out the ghost general's soul crystal. Shang Tianliang was immediately shocked. Just what did you kill? Previously, Shang Tianliang did not have much of an idea of the demonic ghost strength. However, when he killed a few demonic ghosts and obtained the soul crystals that weighed a few taels, with the heaviest weighing only half a catty, he finally realized how powerful the demonic ghosts were. The soul crystal that Chu Xiu took out now seemed to weigh at least 5 catties. Just what kind of monster was that? It's just a high-level demonic ghost with a cultivation equivalent to a martial immortal. Shang Tianliang immediately stopped talking. He coughed and changed the topic. You've exhausted too much of your power. Let's not talk so much for now. Let's recover our power first. After Chu Xiu spent almost a day recovering his power and primordial spirit, he told Shang Tianliang everything that had happened since he entered the Central Plains. After hearing it, Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu with a hint of pity. Chu Xiu was definitely the unlucky kind. As soon as he entered, he encountered a high-level demonic ghost. Then he was surrounded by Yuan Fu and the others. Not only did he fight 2 battles, but because he refined the soul crystal, he was targeted by the ghost general with a cultivation equivalent to a martial immortal. Shang Tianliang even dared to say that among all the martial artists who entered the Central Plains, Chu Xiu was the most unlucky one. By the way, City Lord Shang, what did you do after entering the Central Plains? Shang Tianliang thought for a moment and said, kill the demonic ghost and steal the token. That's it? Shang Tianliang glanced at Chu Xiu and said, that's normal. Apart from that, what else do you want? Chu Xiu choked. Indeed, 90% of martial artists should have such a routine. City Lord Shang, did you meet anyone else? Shang Tianliang said, I didn't meet anyone else, but I met Qin Di. That guy basically had no opponents. As long as he met someone, he could get a token. As long as he met a demonic ghost, it was basically a kill. So, I only exchanged a few words with him. We didn't travel together. Shang Tianliang paused and added, by the way, you don't have to worry about the others. They all have their own tricks up their sleeves, so they should be fine. After all, not everyone is as unlucky as you. Chu Xiu was speechless. Shang Tianliang suddenly thought of something. He said to Chu Xiu with a serious expression, Boy Chu Xiu, be careful of the people from the Sanskrit sect. What's wrong with the Sanskrit sect? Shang Tianliang said, previously, Tao Qiushui mentioned that some people will deliberately suppress their cultivation and only break through to martial immortal after entering the Central Plains. That's the case with Singalo from the Sanskrit sect. Furthermore, the Sanskrit sect used some unknown method to recruit 80% of their disciples in just a few days. So, most of the martial artists from the Sanskrit sect in the Central Plains move in groups of 3 to 5. If they meet the people from the Sanskrit sect, most martial artists can only admit that they are unlucky and hand over their token. Everyone knows about the grudge between you and the Sanskrit sect. Singalo even tried to find your location. However, you are still considered lucky. Singalo's location is completely different from yours. Even if he knows you are here, it will take him some time to find you. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed coldly. If he really finds his way here, it's hard to say who will be the one to kill who. Shang Tianliang shook his head and said, with your current strength, you might not be at a disadvantage even if you face a first heaven martial immortal like Singalo. However, the problem is, do you think he is the only troublesome person from the Sanskrit sect? Several dozen people from the Sanskrit sect have come. Singalo has already recruited 80% of them. If they attack together, you won't be able to handle them. Chu Xiu nodded. Although he was reluctant to admit it, he made a mental note of it. Where do you plan to go next? Are you going to the center of the central province to find the others? Shang Tianliang asked. Chu Xiu said, don't be anxious. Earlier, after I killed the core of that ghost general, or rather, after I freed the cultivator from the battle god sect, he gave me a piece of information. It was the place where he died. There was a relic that he had obtained after fighting with others. From his tone, it should be an extremely precious item. I plan to retrieve it first before entering the center of the central province. Shang Tianliang frowned slightly and said, That guy has already become the core of the Ghost General. Can his words be trusted? Don't think that it's a trap. Chu Xiu shook his head and said in a lecturing tone, City Master Shang, aren't your thoughts a little too dark? Why do you always think of people as bad? That's not good. A man's words are always kind when he's about to die. I believe he won't lie before his death. Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu speechlessly. Do you think you're qualified to say that I'm dark? Chapter 1256. Although Shang Tianliang felt that the thing that Chu Xiu wanted to find was a bit unreliable, he still believed in Chu Xiu's ability to read people, so he went with him to find that place. Although thousands of years had passed, the central state was only so big, so it was still very easy to find it. But that martial artist once said that there should be a high-grade demonic ghost guarding that place, and that he died at the hands of that high-grade demonic ghost when he was injured. But for Chu Xiu, this was not a difficult thing. In any case, he had killed more than one high-grade demonic ghost. Shang Tianliang asked, I have never encountered a high-grade demonic ghost. Tell me, what is so special about it? How should I deal with it? Chu Xiu thought for a moment, then said, the ghost general that I encountered before should be an extremely special existence. In the central state, there should not be such a demonic ghost. But other high-grade demonic ghosts, they are illusory, and it is very difficult to use absolute power to deal with them. So if you really want to kill a high-grade demonic ghost, the simplest way is to enter their rules, in the rules they have constructed, to find their weaknesses and loopholes. Although Chu Xiu did not encounter as many demonic ghosts as Shang Tianliang, but he had killed 2 high-grade demonic ghosts. This kind of experience was enough for Chu Xiu to infer some of the rules and clues about demonic ghosts. Just like that evil village he encountered before, from the moment he saw that village, he had already entered the rules of that demonic ghost. Normal people would not drink the severed finger corpse water that the old woman brought. Almost everyone would choose to turn hostile and kill all the demonic ghosts. But as soon as you make a move, you have already fallen into the trap. Endless killing will invade your heart, making you completely lost. So only by drinking the severed finger corpse water, and letting yourself enter the rules, can you find the loopholes. Shang Tianliang said thoughtfully, so, the most important thing is the rules? Chu Xiu nodded. Yes, demonic ghosts are not the core is their rules. The rules of the central state are twisted, which is why things like demonic ghosts are born. Their very existence is twisted, but we are normal. If we use normal power to deal with these twisted monsters, of course, there will be all kinds of accidents. Only by entering their laws will we be able to completely annihilate them. The two of them continued their discussion as they headed in that direction. Unknowingly, the sky around them began to darken. Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang looked at each other. They had probably entered the demonic ghost's domain. After walking for less than 15 minutes, a dilapidated temple appeared in front of Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang. The red tiles of the temple were covered with a layer of dust, making them look like black tiles. The plaque hanging on the door was crooked and on the verge of falling. Looking closely, one could see that the name on it was Samsara Temple. Shang Tianliang raised his eyebrows and took the lead to knock on the door. After a long while, the door creaked open and a monk's head appeared. However, there were no eyes on the head. There were only 2 bloody holes, and scarlet blood was still flowing out of them. Half of his face was rotten, and there were maggots crawling on it, which looked extremely terrifying. The ghost monk grinned. This poor monk has been waiting for you for a long time. Please come in. Even Shang Tianliang's heart couldn't help but skip a beat at this sudden scene. When ordinary people saw this horrible scene, their subconscious reaction would be to scream. However, for a warrior like Shang Tianliang who had climbed out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, he was not afraid of the living, so how could he be afraid of a dead person? Therefore, his subconscious reaction was to throw a punch, and at the same time he shouted, "What kind of demons and ghosts are you? Go to hell!" Subconsciously, Shang Tianliang completely forgot what Chu Xiu had said to him before, and smashed the ghost monk's head with one punch. Chu Xiu cursed inwardly. As expected, with this punch, the scenery around Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang instantly changed. They went from being outside the temple to being inside the temple, and the door was already tightly shut. Moreover, countless monks surrounded them. Some were headless, some had their stomachs cut open, and some were like dried corpses. In any case, they were all extremely hideous. The ghost monk from before also walked over and shook his head. This poor monk wants to welcome you, but you want to kill this poor monk. This is not right. Shang Tianliang frowned and directly threw a punch at the door, but there seemed to be a layer of barrier around them, which completely offset the power of his punch. Looking at the group of ghost monks around him, Shang Tianliang's eyes revealed a hint of killing intent. He immediately wanted to use the Withering Glory domain to attack, but he was stopped by Chu Xiu. Master Shang, don't waste your energy. From the moment you attacked, we have already fallen into the rules of this demonic ghost. These things are real in your eyes, and they are also real in your perception, but they might be fake. You will only be wasting your energy if you make a move. Then what do you think we should do? Shang Tianliang said impatiently. Chu Xiu walked out and ignored the terrifying ghost monks in front of him, as if they were ordinary monks. He said lightly, "It is wrong for us to attack, but why don't you let us leave? Is this a temple or a bandit's nest?" The ghost monk put his palms together and said, "Buddha-mi, you may not know, but our reincarnation temple only has the door to enter, but there is no way out. If you want to go out, you must walk out of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Those who come in are people, but those who go out are not necessarily people." The ghost monk looked at Chu Xiu, and the rotten flesh on his face trembled, which made him look even more evil. "All right, then show us the so-called 6 paths of reincarnation." The group of ghost monks dispersed and led the way, bringing Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang straight into the Mahavira Hall. However, in the Mahavira Hall of the Reincarnation Temple, what they worshipped was not a Buddha statue, but a huge wheel. The wheel was densely inscribed with Sanskrit, and there were 6 entrances that rotated continuously. When Shang Tianliang saw this thing, he could not help but feel his hair stand on end. "I say, you are not going to enter it, are you?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course, otherwise why would I come here? I said that the demonic ghosts themselves are formed by the rules of the Central Plains. If you do not enter and feel their rules, how can you break through their rules? Master Shang, you should actually enter and give it a try. These demonic ghosts attack your state of mind, but at the same time, your state of mind will also become stronger in this kind of environment. This is also a kind of cultivation." Shang Tianliang curled his lips and said, "Forget it, I am not in the mood to be abused. Go ahead, I will protect you here." Chu Xiu did not insist and directly stepped into the 6 paths of reincarnation. In the next moment, the white light completely enveloped Chu Xiu. When he reappeared, he had become an old yellow bull, dragging a plow through the fields. Behind him, the whips of the farmers were constantly lashing at him. The pain was extremely real. Chu Xiu was like a spectator. He retained his original consciousness, but he couldn't do anything. On the other hand, the old ox's consciousness and all kinds of feelings could be transmitted into his mind. It was as if he really had another body. Interesting as expected of a high-level demonic ghost. It is so lifelike and even more ostentatious than the village from before. But what is the meaning of bringing me to the path of the beast for the first time? It is very unfriendly. Chu Xiu was like a cold spectator, experiencing the old yellow bull's life. He plowed the fields for others, but was repeatedly beaten up. He was so tired in the fields, but in exchange, he did not rest and build up his strength, but under the butcher's knife, his flesh was cut and his bones were removed. Unwillingness. Injustice. Strong resentment filled Chu Xiu's heart, but he forcibly suppressed it. Another white light flashed, and Chu Xiu's figure appeared in hell. Countless vengeful souls and hungry ghosts were wailing. This time he used his own body. He was tied to a stone pillar, and Magistrate Chui, who had a small mustache, pronounced his crimes. The criminal Chu Xiu, in the world of the living, has committed heinous crimes, killing without limit. He is a person who has committed the most heinous crimes. Send him to the 18th level of hell, never to reincarnate. As Magistrate Chui's voice fell, Chu Xiu was immediately brought to the 18th level of hell by the ghost messengers. He experienced the tongue-pulling hell, the scissors hell, the ice hell, the volcano hell, the endless purgatory, and many other tortures. The pain was clearly transmitted to Chu Xiu's body, but he forcibly suppressed it. He even had the mood to study some of the details in hell. As a martial artist, not just Chu Xiu, almost all of them had fought their way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Even those disciples of the big sects who grew up in a greenhouse might not have experienced much fighting, but from the beginning of martial arts cultivation, tempering the flesh and bones, condensing the true pellet, and refining the primordial spirit, which one of them was not painful. This degree of physical torture was not as troublesome as the resentment he suppressed in the path of the beast just now. Perhaps this demonic ghost was controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation. Seeing that the path of hell was useless to Chu Xiu, it immediately changed the scene. This time, Chu Xiu was reincarnated into the path of heaven. He was surrounded by embroidered clothes, delicacies, heavenly ladies, and flowers. There was no killing, no conflict. Everything was so peaceful. It was a sublimation of bliss, making one forget to return. This feeling was something that Chu Xiu, who had always fought and killed people in the pugilistic world, had never experienced before. It was a very novel feeling. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. How can there be true bliss? Without true power, this so-called bliss is just a fleeting cloud. It can be shattered by a light slash. The peak of our martial arts cultivation is not to step on others, but to prevent others from stepping on us. Even if it is heaven and earth, it is not allowed. The next moment, the blissful path of heaven shattered. What appeared in front of Chu Xiu was a world filled with blood and murderous intent. The path of Azura. Chapter 1257. Compared to the unwillingness and resentment he had suffered in the animal realm, the various pains he had suffered in the hell realm, and the gentle bone-eroding knife of the celestial realm, the Azura realm was the one with the greatest lethality for Chu Xiu. There was only one theme in the Azura realm, and that was killing. Azuras were born to kill. They had no emotions and only knew how to fight and kill. In the bloody pugilistic world, there was no lack of killing. Chu Xiu had killed countless people in his life, but he dared to say that he had not lost himself in this kind of killing. Killing for the sake of killing was the true loss. Fortunately, he had experienced the same scene in the ghost village, but he had held on in the end. So this time, the Azura realm could not do anything to Chu Xiu. The scene changed again, and this time, it was the hungry ghost realm. Countless thin and weak hungry ghosts with swollen bellies that looked like pregnant women wailed in the hungry ghost realm, craving for food. However, no matter how much food there was, it would not be able to fill their stomachs. What the hungry ghost realm represented was greed. It was endless greed. Chu Xiu was also greedy. It should be said that there was nothing that people did not desire. From the moment people were born, greed was engraved in the deepest part of their hearts. They could pluck fruits to fill their bellies, but they wanted to eat meat. So people invented knives and spears to hunt and kill living creatures. Cooked meat tasted better than raw meat, so people learned to use fire to make meat tastier. Everyone was greedy for better things, but it was also because of greed that people could become stronger. Chu Xiu was also greedy for power, greedy for freedom, and greedy for the highest realm. The only difference was that he could face this kind of greed. The power of the hungry ghost realm could not do anything to Chu Xiu. This kind of greed did not even need to be suppressed by Chu Xiu, because it was a part of his emotions, so why should he suppress it? Compared to the other 5 realms, the mortal realm was the most complicated one. Compared to the other 5 realms, the mortal realm was the most complicated one. In this life, Chu Xiu was reborn as a human. When he was young, his family was poor. His parents died early and he was bullied. It wasn't easy for him to study hard and become a talent, but he was suppressed by his superiors, and his future was bleak. When he reached middle age, he was mediocre. In the end, he gave up on his perseverance and conspired with them. However, he was despised by his wife and children, and in the end he became a loner. When the new emperor ascended to the throne and thoroughly investigated corruption, he was pulled out by the Shangguan as a scapegoat and was beheaded at the entrance of the market. However, the people who cheered were the people he had saved when he was an upright official. Dozens of years in one's life, one's body is not in one's control, one's fate is not in one's control. Every detail seemed to be real, imprinted in Chu Xiu's mind, and he almost couldn't breathe. Ordinary illusions could not do anything to Chu Xiu, but in the 6 paths of reincarnation, everything he experienced was too real. It was so real that it was as if he was alive. In fact, he could even recall it clearly every day. In this life, he was not the demon lord Chu Xiu who dominated the lower worlds and the Daluotian, nor was he the martial arts expert who could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground and shatter mountains and rivers with his fists. When he was bullied and humiliated in his childhood, he was helpless. He could only grit his teeth and endure the humiliation. When he was suppressed by the Shangguan, he was helpless. In the face of power, people were like ants. When his wife and children did not understand him and left him, he could do nothing. The human heart was the most difficult to change. When he was finally beheaded at the entrance of the market, the feeling that even his life was not in his control was the most unbearable for Chu Xiu. In the mortal realm, being a human was the most difficult. Fortunately, in the 6 paths of reincarnation, Chu Xiu did not lose himself, and he managed to survive. Looking at the vast expanse of whiteness around him, Chu Xiu said lightly, "I've already tried the 6 paths of reincarnation, are you still not going to show your real body?" As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared in front of him again. But this time, Chu Xiu was directly thrown into the mortal realm and reincarnated. At this moment, Chu Xiu's expression changed. He had underestimated this demonic ghost. Or rather, he had missed one thing. Before the martial arts expert of the war-battling god sect dissipated, he had indeed told Chu Xiu this news out of good intentions. He wanted to thank him, not to deceive him. In his opinion, Chu Xiu was the only one in the past thousands of years who could fight the ghost general head-on, find its weakness, and free it. Chu Xiu's strength was comparable to that of a martial immortal, so it would not be a problem for him to deal with a normal high-level demonic ghost and obtain the item. And Chu Xiu actually thought so too, so along the way, Chu Xiu was very calm, as if he was not going to face a high-level demonic ghost, but to dig for treasures. But he had overlooked one thing, that was something that happened thousands of years ago. Although demonic ghosts were not humans, they would also become stronger with the passage of time. Because the attack methods of demonic ghosts were somewhat unpredictable, Daluotian martial arts experts simply divided demonic ghosts into low-level, mid-level, and high-level. Low-level demonic ghosts were demonic ghosts that had just been born. Their abilities were simple and crude, and martial arts experts of the true fire spirit refinement realm could easily kill them. Mid-level demonic ghosts could already infiltrate people's minds and create illusions, and martial arts experts of the true fire spirit refinement realm could lose their lives if they were not careful. And high-level demonic ghosts could threaten the existence of the mysterious enlightenment realm of heaven and earth, so they had to be treated with even more caution. As for the ones above the high-level demonic ghosts, there was no need to talk about them. However, high-level demonic ghosts also had different levels of strength. This thing had been a high-level demonic ghost since a few thousand years ago. How much had its current strength improved compared to a few thousand years ago? Chu Xiu did not have time to think too much. The experiences and memories of one life after another were forcibly stuffed into his mind. The 7 sufferings of life: birth, aging, illness, and death, love and hate, resentment and separation, and unattainable. Chu Xiu experienced these things over and over again. He wanted to forget them, but he could not. Even in the end, Chu Xiu was a little muddle-headed and gradually forgot that he was Chu Xiu, the devil lord who dominated the Jianghu, and became a member of this samsara, wasting his life. In the samsara temple, the ghost monks all had extremely strange smiles on their faces, which made Shang Tianyang's hair stand on end. Chu Xiu had already entered for 2 hours. Why had he not come out yet? Although Shang Tianliang did not enter, his senses told him that the 6 paths of reincarnation were very dangerous. Even if he had confidence in Chu Xiu, he was a little uncertain at that moment. At that moment, in the samsara, Chu Xiu did not know how many lives he had experienced and how much suffering he had experienced. His mind was almost filled with those memories. However, at that moment, a word suddenly popped up in Chu Xiu's mind. Dugu Weiwei. He had his own memories, but he was Dugu Weiwei's earthly soul doppelganger. Was he Dugu Weiwei? The heavenly soul had Dugu Weiwei's martial arts inheritance, Dugu Weiwei's body, and all of Dugu Weiwei's memories. Was he heavenly soul or Dugu Weiwei? Why am I me? Why am I me? How can I know who I am? Is it my body, my primordial spirit, or my memories? Chu Xiu was not a person who liked to think too much. In the past, he would definitely not think too much about bickering. However, today, it suddenly surfaced in his mind. In the cycle of reincarnation, Chu Xiu was a street vendor in this life. He was born into poverty and was illiterate. It was not easy for him to survive in troubled times, and he even had to suffer the humiliation of the soldiers and gangs in the city. In front of him, a gangster kicked over his stall and said fiercely, "Young man, have you paid this month's money? If you don't pay, I will beat you up every time I see you if you dare to appear on this street again." However, what made the gangster feel strange was that the young man in front of him did not panic. Instead, he laughed. He laughed so hard that the gangster's hair stood on end. "Young man, have you lost your mind? Why are you laughing?" Chu Xiu raised his head. There was no fear or confusion in his eyes. They were extremely clear. "There is no proof of Bodhi. Today, I know that I am me. I'm me, I'm Chu Xiu, what's there to ask for?" As soon as he finished speaking, the gangster's body began to shatter. The whole city and the whole world were shattering. The 6 paths of reincarnation had collapsed. In the outside world, just as Shang Tianliang was feeling a little uncertain, Chu Xiu suddenly appeared in front of him, giving him a fright. However, before he could speak, everything around him was dissipating. Those terrifying and ferocious ghost monks were dissipating, and so was the Samsara temple. What was left on the ground were only 2 lifelike corpses. One was a monk. Judging from his clothes, he should be from the heavenly Luo treasure temple. The other was the warrior from the warfighting sect. Shang Tianliang said in surprise, "You dealt with the demonic ghost? How did you deal with it? Was the previous incarnation of the demonic ghost this monk?" As I said, if you want to deal with the demonic ghost, you just have to enter his rules. I broke his rules, so naturally I dealt with the demonic ghost. As Chu Xiu spoke, he took out a bracelet next to the monk's corpse. The bracelet seemed to be made of gold. There were 6 gems inlaid on it, and various strange Sanskrit characters were engraved around it. Chu Xiu sighed and said, "That demonic ghost wasn't transformed from the monk, but from the bracelet's artifact spirit. Strange, truly strange." Shang Tianliang was also a little speechless. Chu Xiu did seem to be different from ordinary people. There were special existences among the demonic ghosts, but there were definitely not many of them. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, had encountered a total of 3 high-level demonic ghosts. In the end, 2 of them were special. At this moment, Chu Xiu wore the bracelet on his wrist. In the next instant, a strange light flashed. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the 6 paths of reincarnation revolved unceasingly, causing those who looked at it to involuntarily be drawn into it. Shang Tianliang only took a glance, and his spirit seemed to have experienced many years. He immediately shook his head and said in shock, "What is this thing? The artifact spirit of this thing has dissipated, but it still has such strong power?" Chu Xiu shook the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet and said, "Its artifact spirit has dissipated, but in my hand, I am its artifact spirit. Whatever the artifact spirit can control, I can control." As I said, there are benefits to actively enter the rules of those demonic ghosts and compete with them. Now look, the benefits are here. Chapter 1258. If he killed other demonic ghosts, Chu Xiu would only get soul crystals. But if he killed this demonic ghost, Chu Xiu would get something more worthwhile than soul crystals. The demonic ghost in the reincarnation temple was extremely special. Because it was transformed from a device spirit, it did not leave a soul crystal after its death. Instead, it left its body, which was the bracelet that Chu Xiu named the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet. Chu Xiu did not know what the bracelet was used for before. But now, after Chu Xiu had experienced the baptism of the 6 Paths of Reincarnation, his own power could already communicate with the bracelet. In other words, as long as he got the bracelet, Chu Xiu could use the power of his primordial spirit as a guide to pull it into the 6 Paths of Reincarnation. In other words, Chu Xiu could directly control the power of the demonic ghost in the reincarnation temple. And that was not all. Before, although Chu Xiu's state of mind was not weak, there were actually some problems. After learning the truth about his life, he felt a constant pressure pressing on him. Heavenly Soul could not be completely trusted, and his future was uncertain. Chu Xiu did not know whether he would become a part of Dugu Weiwa or be devoured in the future. Thus, during that period of time, Chu Xiu's state of mind had even become unbalanced. It was all thanks to Patriarch Blood River's timely arrival that allowed him to go on a killing spree and vent the depression in his heart. Only then did his state of mind calm down slightly. After experiencing everything in the 6 Paths of Reincarnation, Chu Xiu could be considered to have benefited from the disaster and understood many things. How could there be enlightenment? Today, I know that I am who I am. Regardless of whether Chu Xiu was Dugu Weiwei's Earth Soul doppelganger, and regardless of what Chu Xiu's memory looked like, whether it was his previous life or this life, right now he was only Chu Xiu, and could only be Chu Xiu. The tempering of one's state of mind was a very miraculous thing. It was formless and intangible. It could not be seen or touched. However, from the inexperienced martial artists to the peak experts of the 9th level of martial immortal realm, everyone's state of mind would be tempered at all times as long as they were in the world of mortals. At that moment, Shang Tiangliang sighed. They all say that the central province is dangerous. Now, I believe them. The monks of this heavenly Civ treasure monastery should have already reached the martial immortal realm. Yet they died here. Chu Xiu said in astonishment. His body has already decayed. How can you tell he's a martial immortal? Shang Tiangliang pointed to the Kasaya on the corpse and said, Boy, you've been in the Daluocean for so long before me. Don't you know some general knowledge? In the heavenly Civ treasure monastery, only martial immortals are qualified to wear golden kasayas. Profound understanding cultivators wear red. Clearly, this person was also suppressing his strength. He only stepped into the martial immortal realm after entering the central province. Chu Xiu nodded in a pensive manner. Then, he went to search the body of the martial god sex cultivator. He had a secret spatial box on him. It was likely protected by a formation. However, since he was in the central province, no formation could be used outside. Thus, Chu Xiu was able to easily open it. Other than the various cultivation resources and medicinal pellets used for healing, there was only one thing that caught Chu Xiu's attention. It was a damaged steel. However, there was a sharp glint on it. If weaker cultivators were to stand beside the steel, they would easily be injured by the sharp glint on the steel. After taking a glance at the words on the steel, Chu Xiu quickly imprinted them into his mind. After a long while, he took a deep breath and said, 7 limits, heaven devouring. What was recorded on the stone tablet was the strongest move of the 7 limits of devouring the heavens and exterminating the earth. Heaven devouring. Although there were not many detailed records of the 7 limits in the history of the Daluocean Kingdom, and they were mostly legends, there were people who had obtained the 7 limits in the past. According to them, the strongest of the 7 limits, heaven devouring, was more powerful than the sum of the other 6. It was one of the few powerful blade techniques that could use a pure martial skill to fight against a true divine ability. Unfortunately, the legend of the 7 limits had spread far and wide. The last master of heaven devouring had apparently died an unnatural death, and the technique had been lost ever since. But now, it seemed that the last master of heaven devouring had died in the central province for some unknown reason. It had then been obtained by the cultivator from the war god sect, and after several thousand years, it had finally fallen into Chu Xiu's hands. This thing was indeed a supreme treasure, and its power was comparable to a divine ability. It was no wonder that the cultivator from the War God sect had fought with others for it, even risking his life. In the end, he had been gravely injured and died at the hands of the demon ghost. As he thought of this, Chu Xiu suddenly realized that the legend of the 7 limits devouring wasn't groundless after all. The cultivator from the War God sect should have been qualified to compete for the exalted divine palace, but he had died at the hands of a high-grade demon ghost right after obtaining the 7 limits. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? However, Chu Xiu wasn't too worried. He had a tough life. He had already learned 2 of the 7 limits of sea-shattering and earth-shattering, and he was still alive and well. Another one wouldn't be a big deal. After putting away the items, Chu Xiu buried the cultivator from the War God sect and the monk from the Tianluo temple. Since he had taken someone else's things, he had to let them rest in peace. As for the monk from the Tianluo temple, he wasn't a demon ghost, and Chu Xiu had taken the monk's 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, which could be considered karma. Even though he had always disliked the monks of the Buddhist sect, Chu Xiu still respected the dead very much. Let's go into the central province and meet up with the others. With a wave of his hand, Chu Xiu led Shang Tianliang in the direction of the central province. However, Chu Xiu didn't know if it was fate that brought him to monks. He had just buried the monk, but within a day he encountered another 2 groups of monks. Chu Xiu and Shang Tianliang stood at the bottom of the cliff. Below them, 3 cultivators from the Sanskrit sect were besieging a cultivator from the Tianluo temple. All of them had the strength of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, and they were qualified to enter the central province. They belonged to the upper echelons of the 2 sects, so there wouldn't be any weaklings among them. Their strength was about the same, and the monk from the Tianluo temple was in a precarious situation. The monk from the Tianluo temple was a middle-aged monk. From his appearance, he seemed to be cultivating his body, which was similar to the Great Light Temple in the lower world. At this moment, he was forced to the extreme. He let out a roar, and the red kasaya on his body was directly torn apart, revealing his lean upper body. Dazzling golden Sanskrit characters appeared on his skin one after another, making him look like he was plated with a layer of gold. One of the monks from the Sanskrit sect opened his territory, and the strange black demonic fog turned into 1,000 giant snakes, gnawing at the golden Buddhist light. He sneered and said, "Lesser invincible golden body?" Using the Sanskrit totem of a martial immortal to forcefully perform the invincible golden body is just a trick. Monk Fa Ming, didn't the Tianluo temple always say that the people from the Sanskrit sect like to use unorthodox methods and tricks? You're only at the mysterious heaven and earth realm to forcefully master the invincible golden body, aren't you also using tricks? The monks from the Tianluo temple are all hypocrites. Monk Fa Ming was unmoved, and he only said coldly, "The technique is for one's own use, so what's the point of using tricks? I endured the pain of the Sanskrit characters entering my body and mastered the lesser invincible golden body just to use this technique against heretics like you. And the Sanskrit sect cultivates all kinds of evil techniques as your foundation. Do you think you can compare to me?" A Sanskrit cultivator with a human body and a lion's head behind him snorted. The monks from the Tianluo temple are so stubborn. There's no need to waste words with them. Let's kill one first. Although the Tianluo temple sent more people than our Sanskrit sect this time, they've already been wiped out. Palace Master Shingala has ordered that the Tianluo temple's forces must be wiped out in this contest for the exalted divine palace. Not a single one of them is allowed to leave the central province. As the burly man's voice fell, the lion-headed demon god behind him roared, and the surrounding power of heaven and earth dissipated with his roar. Another warrior from the Sanskrit sect formed a seal with his hand, causing an endless amount of world-extinguishing fire to bloom out, wrapping around Fa Ming. At the same time, he held the triple annihilation city arrow in his hand, staring at Fa Ming. Once he found an opening in his opponent's defense, he would immediately shoot the arrow. Shang Tianliang couldn't help but shake his head as he watched the fierce battle between the 2 sides. These monks are really ruthless. They don't hesitate to kill their own people. It seems that the Great Radiance Temple and Subodhi Monastery in the lower realm are quite peaceful. One is in the south, the other in the north. They haven't fought much, but sometimes they even exchange teachings. Of course, now that they've been destroyed by you, there's no chance for them to exchange teachings. Chu Xiu said lightly. Wrong. Only the Tianluo Temple is a monk. To be precise, those from the Sanskrit are monks, not monks. Their orthodoxies are different, so they're destined to fight to the death. Although the Great Radiance Temple and Subodhi Monastery have their differences, their orthodoxies are exactly the same. Of course, they won't fight so fiercely. As the two sides spoke, the outcome of the battle had already been decided. Fa Ming wasn't weak. He could use a portion of the power of his supernatural powers at the ethereal enlightenment realm. In a one-on-one fight, none of the three from the Sanskrit sect was a match for him. However, it was 3 against 1. Even though Fa Ming had used his full strength, it was still useless. The 3 of them were determined to kill him, and Fa Ming didn't even have a chance to escape. Fa Ming's eyes revealed a determined murderous intent. He was ready to use the power of his qi and blood to destroy the Sanskrit inscriptions on his body. Even if he died, he would drag a heretic down with him. At this moment, Chu Xiu's body moved and he leaped down the cliff. He held the Vairocana seal in his hand and a Buddha's light bloomed. Monk Fa Ming was in despair when the Buddha's light blasted towards the 3 people, forcing them to retreat. Shang Tianliang looked at the scene below with a dumbfounded expression. He still couldn't react. He had seen Chu Xiu kill monks, but Chu Xiu actually saved monks. What was the meaning of this? Chapter 1259. Chu Xiu's sudden attack stunned not only Shang Tianliang, but also Fa Ming. When he saw the Vairocana seal fall, Fa Ming, who was in despair, thought that a fellow disciple of the heavenly Luo Temple had come to save him. He did not expect it to be an unfamiliar martial artist. Looking at Chu Xiu's appearance, he was definitely not from the Sanskrit sect, but why would he come to save him, and why would he know his Buddhist cultivation method? But at this time, when the 3 Sanskrit martial artists saw Chu Xiu's face, they were stunned for a moment, then they said in surprise, Chu Xiu. It's you. The reason the Sanskrit people recognized Chu Xiu was not because Chu Xiu's fame had reached a level that could shock the Western region, but because Xen Jialua had told them to pay attention to Chu Xiu before they came here. If they found traces of Chu Xiu, they should kill him if there were many, escape if there were few. It would be best if they could capture him alive, but if not, they should seal his true spirit and take his head back. Xen Jialua knew about Chu Xiu's strength, so he meant that groups of heaven and earth mysterious realm martial artists could surround and kill Chu Xiu, while those with few could just escape. But these 3 people misunderstood Xen Jialua's meaning, or maybe Xen Jialua did not make it clear. From their point of view, they had 3 people on their side, which was already a lot. On the other hand, Chu Xiu's side only had 1 person, in addition to the heavily injured monk Fa Ming. They were definitely the side with fewer people. The martial artist with the 1,000-head snake in the domain sneered, Chu Xiu, do you know that Master Xen Jialua is also looking for you? We didn't go looking for trouble with you, but now you have taken the initiative to come to us. Today, when we get rid of Fa Ming, we will also get rid of you. At this time, most of the golden Sanskrit characters around Fa Ming's body had broken, but he struggled to say, Benefactor, do you also have a grudge with the Sanskrit sect? They have the advantage in numbers. This penniless monk is now an arrow at the end of its flight and doesn't have much combat strength left. You should leave. This penniless monk will stall them here. I only hope that when Benefactor meets the people of my heavenly Luo Treasure Monastery in the future, tell them about this penniless monk's death and ask them to avenge this penniless monk. Monk Fa Ming didn't recognize Chu Xiu, but in his opinion, Chu Xiu had used a Buddhist technique at the critical moment, and he had a grudge against Sanskrit, so he must be on his side. Therefore, he had a good impression of Chu Xiu, and he couldn't bear to see Chu Xiu die here. Chu Xiu smiled and said, I can't do that. Master Fa Ming, you should talk to the other masters of the Heavenly Treasure Temple personally. Seeing that Chu Xiu didn't seem to put them in his eyes, the cultivator controlling the thousand-headed snake said coldly, "Kill Chu Xiu first. He is the person Master Xangelo wants." As soon as the cultivator's voice fell, the black snake in his domain suddenly issued a shrill scream, and the black snake turned into a boundless thick fog that instantly surrounded Chu Xiu. But before the remaining two cultivators could act, Chu Xiu had already moved. The next moment, a golden Buddha's light rose from Chu Xiu's body, and a Vairocana Dharma idol appeared behind him. The true fire of the sun stained the Buddha's light and burned away all the evil forces in the world. Chu Xiu took a step forward and instantly arrived in front of the cultivator, punching him. The black fog around the cultivator condensed into chains, but upon a closer look, they turned out to be snake heads. However, under the absolute power of Chu Xiu, these snake heads were instantly smashed to pieces by Chu Xiu's punch. Even the cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. At this moment, the other two cultivators finally reacted. The world annihilation fire under Chu Xiu's feet burned fiercely, and at the same time, a roar shook his spirit. But unfortunately, this level of attack had almost no effect on Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had already deduced the world annihilation fire to an extremely deep level. Even if the palace lord of Makala deity palace was here, he might not be as strong as Chu Xiu, let alone the others. As for the other person's soul attack, Chu Xiu, who had refined the soul crystal and tempered his mental state to an extremely tough state of mind in the 6 paths of reincarnation, did not have to worry about it at all. He could just take it head-on. In the next moment, they were shocked to find that the world annihilation fire actually took the initiative to avoid Chu Xiu, and the sound wave of the lion roar seemed to have no effect on Chu Xiu at all. Chu Xiu punched again, smashing all the black fog in front of the cultivator. His left hand grabbed the cultivator's neck and lifted him up. Under the horrified gaze of the cultivator, there was a loud bang, and the cultivator's head had already been smashed. Fa Ming, who was standing behind Chu Xiu, watched this scene with his mouth agape. These 3 Sanskrit cultivators were all at the level of a palace lord in the Sanskrit sect. Even if they weren't as strong as Xangelo, they were still not ordinary people. But in the end, they were killed by Chu Xiu with just a few punches and kicks. Although Chu Xiu's last move was a little cruel, Fa Ming was very happy to see it. When it came to other people, the Heavenly Luo Temple would still pay attention to the principle of forgiving people wherever possible, and what it meant to put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. But for the heretics of the Sanskrit sect, as long as they existed, it was a humiliation to the Heavenly Luo Temple. After killing one person in the blink of an eye, Chu Xiu suddenly stomped on the empty space in front of him. A small black snake hidden on the ground was smashed by Chu Xiu's stomp, and it actually let out a miserable howl like a human. If you want to die, die cleanly. Do you think you can resurrect in a place like the Central Province that is full of demonic ghosts with these little tricks? The cultivator who controlled the world annihilation fire and the cultivator with a lion's head and a human body looked at each other. At the same time, they saw incomparable shock and panic in each other's eyes. Half-step martial immortal. This time, Xangelo had caused them a lot of trouble. If they had known that Chu Xiu was a half-step martial immortal, even if they had twice as many people, they still wouldn't have dared to attack him. At this moment, the two of them had already lost their will to fight. They immediately burst forth with their fastest speed, turned around, and fled. Chu Xiu didn't chase after them. The array destruction tool appeared in his hand, and he slashed down with it. The ultimate sharpness suddenly descended. It was invisible and intangible, but the entire heaven and earth shone with a sharp light, illuminating the entire sky. The ethereal slash that was unleashed at full force was already an existence that was close to a divine power. The Sanskrit cultivator who used the world annihilation fire suddenly touched his neck. The next moment, his gaze suddenly fell to the ground. Under the slash, his head had been separated from his body. As for the cultivator with a lion's head and a human body, even though he couldn't find a trace of the ethereal slash's slash before it reached him, he still burst forth with his greatest potential at this critical moment of life and death. His hands moved quickly, and in the next moment, the Dharma power behind him blossomed with a vivid golden light. In an instant, he switched positions with his Dharma power, and the Dharma power with a human body and a lion's head was instantly decapitated and torn apart, turning into earth energy and dissipating. In shock, the cultivator immediately formed a hand seal, and the crimson light around him and the golden light of his primordial spirit burst forth at the same time. In an instant, he chose to burn his blood essence and primordial spirit to escape. He was truly afraid. He had seen half-step martial celestials before. With the Sanskrit strength, there was no lack of heaven and earth enlightenment realm cultivators in the sect, and he had seen more than one half-step martial celestial. But now, Chu Xiu's strength was so strong that it made him shudder. Even when Xen Jialua was a half-step martial celestial, he was no match for Chu Xiu. Killing heaven and earth enlightenment realm cultivators was as easy as slaughtering chickens and dogs, and Chu Xiu killed one person with a single slash. This terrifying strength made him wonder if he was facing a martial celestial expert. However, in the next moment, he felt that something was amiss. Why was he burning his blood essence and primordial spirit so quickly? Why did he obtain so much power? They had all reached the heaven and earth enlightenment realm, so they should not have too much control over their own power. He wanted to stop burning his blood essence and primordial spirit, but he was shocked to find that the power of burning his blood essence and primordial spirit was too strong. It was so strong that he could not control it. Even if he suppressed it with all his strength, he could only slow it down for a while. At that moment, he suddenly felt a strong gust of wind from a fist coming from beside him, stirring the void. He subconsciously turned around and punched out as well, but that power seemed to have found an outlet and exploded with a loud bang. His body couldn't even withstand this powerful force and directly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Shang Tianliang descended from the sky and shook his head. He said, "Poor child, why are you running? The faster you run, the faster you die. Haven't you heard of this saying?" Fei Ming, who was behind them, was stunned. Where did these two half-step martial celestials come from? After a while, Fei Ming came to his senses. He took out a red kasaya and put it on. He bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "I'm Fei Ming from the Heavenly Jewel Temple. Thank you, almsgiver Chu, for saving my life. May I know which sect you are from?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I'm from the eastern region. I'm Gu Zun's descendant, and I'm the prefectural governor of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Master Fei Ming, you don't have to worry about it. As you can see, I have a grudge against the Brahma sect's new Vishnu temple master, Singala. He wants to kill me. Therefore, when I saw the Brahma sect's people, I had to attack. And as you can see, Master Fei Ming, I know a Buddhist cultivation method. 10,000 years ago, when I was in the lower world, my lineage had some connection with the heavenly Luo treasure temple. I learned some Buddhist martial arts, and our relationship is very close. Naturally, I can't watch Master Fei Ming be targeted by the people of Sanskrit." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Fei Ming immediately had a good impression of him. It was normal if the other party wanted to use this matter to ask for repayment. A favor from the Heavenly Jewel Temple was very valuable. Among all the Daluotian sects, except for the three Pristines Temple, the Heavenly Jewel Temple was not afraid of anyone. However, the more Chu Xiu said it casually, the more Fei Ming admired him. He felt that Chu Xiu, the descendant of the Pristines Temple, was an upright person. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.